Chapter 53:67. Lu Pingon stared blankly at Chinju on the ground, as if he didn't feel anything. The other elders and disciples of the Qin family faction were also at a loss, below Grand Elder Chinju. Except for the deputy head Chun Dongcheng, Lu Pingon's position was the highest. At this moment, even he was stunned, let alone the others. The silence of Lu Pingon and the others finally gave all the other elders and disciples a clear signal. They all showed strange excitement on their faces. This meant that the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island would usher in a new era from today. A new era was not good news for the Qin family faction, which had been used to being superior. But for the local faction, which had more people, it was undoubtedly a sign of a turnaround. Before this, they had all witnessed Xian Ijia's efforts to build momentum. However, the effect was negligible. After all, a primordial grand uncle master of unknown origin could overpower Supreme Elder Chinjiu. Those who would believe in such a ridiculous story were basically out of their minds. But now, they finally knew that Xian Ijia was not brainless, but they were just frogs in a well. Xian Ijia took, in everyone's expressions. To be honest, his legs were still trembling until just now. But now, after seeing everyone's different expressions, he suddenly felt at ease. Although the people of the Qin family faction were hostile, they were obviously stunned. They were like a group of dragons without a leader in a short period of time. It was destined that they would not make any big trouble. As for Lu Pingon, this guy wanted to raise his arm and call for help. Unfortunately, he was Chinjiu's pro-disciple, but not a real member of the Qin family faction. This was a natural shackle that could not be overcome. He was still far from being able to call for help. As for the local faction, because there was no news from the head Hong Zijuan, they were now like a group of dragons without a leader. The key point was that they were not hostile to Lin Yi, who could overwhelm Grand Elder. At this moment, they were all full of awe. Even if there were a few people with ulterior motives, they dared not jump out to challenge Xian Ijia before they figured out the situation. It was the wisest choice to wait and see. Very well. Now that times have changed, some untimely rules should be changed. The North Island Blue Cloud sect belongs to everyone. From now on, Green Cloud sect of North Island, which is not a single sect, can't put one sect first in everything. Everyone has to follow the rules, and there will be no privilege. Xian Ijia seized the opportunity and said, as soon as he said that, many of the disciples of the local sects immediately cheered. If one were to say who had suffered the most from the Qin family's faction, it would be none other than them. Although there were not many people in the Qin family faction, they relied on the huge halo of Grand Elder Chinjiu. Over the years, as long as it involved good things such as cultivation resources, they would receive preferential treatment without exception. They got the meat, and the disciples of other local factions got the soup. Sometimes they didn't even get the soup, so they didn't dare to say anything even though they were angry. Today, Xian Ijia called for the abolition of the privileges of the Qin family. This was undoubtedly a move to win the hearts of the people. It was simple, but extremely effective. I'd like to ask Elder Xian, which family do you mean by one? At this time, a voice suddenly interrupted the cheers of the crowd. Everyone's eyes suddenly focused on this person. After seeing the person clearly, Xian Ijia's pupils suddenly shrank. Qin Dongcheng. His primordial spirit had left his body for too long, so much so that his body had shown signs of atrophy. Normally, it would take at least a month for him to fully recover. It was a miracle that Qin Dongcheng could stand out at this time. Of course, it's the Qin family of North Island. Xian Ijia immediately responded tit for tat. Although he didn't have the slightest confidence to fight against Qin Dongcheng, the deputy sect leader, now that Chinjiu was killed by Lin, what else did he have to be afraid of? Everyone from the Chen family's faction heard it, right? Times have changed. Even a small character like this who doesn't even count as a fart wants to ride on top of our heads. Do you agree? Chun Dongqing sneered and took the lead to provoke in public. Hearing this, Xinejia panicked. The reason why these people in the Chen family faction gave up before was that they were collectively confused. The main reason was that no one took the lead. Now that Chen Dongqing suddenly appeared, the situation would definitely go out of control. As expected, when Chen Dongqing took the lead to provoke, the other people in the Chen family faction all changed their expressions. Although they were afraid of Lin Yi, who could kill Qinjiu, the person standing in front of them was just a good guy in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, Xinejia. What was there to be afraid of? Hey, you guys have to think carefully. What I just said was personally ordered by Grandmaster Lin Yi. Are you sure you want to disobey him in public? Xinejia quickly brought up Lin Yi. Grandmaster Lin Yi, right? We're so scared. Chun Dongqing deliberately pretended to be frightened, but then he ridiculed. Yes, I admit that your Grand Master Lin Yi is indeed unfathomable, but is that useful? Come on, tell me, how is your Grand Master Lin Yi going to get out of the sky-reaching formation? This was why Chun Dongqing was able to stand up and challenge them. That's right, they didn't dare to face Lin Yi now, but wasn't there still the one step to heaven matrix blocking them? Since Lin Yi couldn't come out, what was there to be afraid of? This, Xinejia choked for a moment. In fact, he had thought about this, but Lin Yi gave the order in a hurry, and he was too excited, so he neglected it. You can't be thinking that you can secretly get him an identity token without us knowing, right? Chun Dongqing sneered. It would not be difficult for Xinejia to get an identity token for Lin Yi if there was no leader just now. But now that he was the vice leader, nothing could be done. Chun Dongqing sneered. The Supreme Elder had fallen, and there was no news from the leader. The person with the highest position was Chun Dongqing, the deputy leader. Most importantly, he was not just a deputy leader in name only. He was the leader of the Chun clan. Unless Lin Yi came in person, the others could only bow their heads in front of him. Xinejia was depressed. It was hard to stabilize the situation, but he did not expect this guy to wake up halfway. What should he do? What? Weren't you in the limelight just now? Elder Xin, it's not appropriate for you to give up so soon, right? That granduncle Lin Yi of yours is still waiting for your good news at the Sky Cliff. It's not good to let him wait anxiously like this, right? Chun Dongqing ridiculed him again and again. The others looked at each other. Xinejia was really far behind Chun Dongqing. In just a few words, the other party had taken control of the situation. Chapter 53-68. Especially in the current situation, if Xinejia directly confronted this guy, it would be a mess immediately. If these people from the Chun family really made a fuss, they might not listen to him even though there were many people in the local faction. Maybe they were waiting to see him make a fool of himself. The situation was getting out of control. At this time, a faint voice suddenly interrupted. Vice Leader Chen, who are you talking about? Chun Dongqing was still pretending to be calm, thinking that Lin Yi couldn't get out of the one step to heaven formation, so he still had a chance to turn the situation around. At this time, after hearing this voice, his legs suddenly went soft, and he almost fell to the ground. How did you get out? Chun Dongqing looked at Lin Yi and his people who were slowly approaching, and he was instantly covered in a cold sweat. He was definitely the one who had the deepest experience of the fear of Lin Yi. The others were just shocked that Lin Yi could actually kill an old monster in the gathering vitality realm, but he was the only one who had experienced it personally. You're curious? Lin Yi smiled and glanced at the others who were just as shocked. He said casually, "I even took care of your grand elder with ease. Do you really believe that a mere one step to heaven formation can trap me? I didn't come out before because I was playing with you." Everyone fell silent. At this time, no one dared to look at Lin Yi, and this was the effect Lin Yi wanted. If he wanted to control the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, then what he had to do now was not to appease them, but to establish his power. From the moment Chinjiu was killed, the rules of the whole Green Cloud sect of the North Island were destined to be remade, and this person could only be Lin Yi. "What are you guys doing?" "Greet Grandmaster." Xian Ijia took the opportunity to give everyone a wink. "Greetings, Grandmaster." All the people present immediately knelt down, from the elders in the Gold Core stage to the ordinary disciples. No one was an exception, whether it was the local faction or the Chun family's faction. Even Chun Dongcheng and Lu Pingon, the two absolute henchmen of Chinjiu, knelt down at this time. They had no choice. The situation was beyond their control. If they dared to disobey, Lin Yi absolutely wouldn't mind killing them again to warn others. Even Chinjiu was killed, let alone the two of them. Lin Yi glanced at the two of them and felt a little pity in his heart. He really didn't intend to keep these two people. Although they weren't a threat to him, they were at the peak of the late stage of Jindan stage and the middle stage of Jindan stage. In addition, with the connections of the Chen family in the North Island, it would be more or less troublesome if they did something bad behind his back. It was a shame that the two were smart enough to stop causing trouble, not giving Lin Yi an excuse to deal with them. They didn't give Lin Yi an excuse to deal with them. Although he wanted to establish power and remake the rules when there was no sufficient reason, even Lin Yi couldn't kill people casually. That would make the whole Green Cloud sect of the North Island panic, and it wouldn't end well. "Well, get up." Lin Yi looked at the people kneeling on the ground. "Thank you, Grandmaster." Everyone got up one after another, and all of them were in fear and trepidation. Today, Lin Yi was a terrible existence above Chenjiu, the highest elder. They were nervous and frightened even in front of Chenjiu, and naturally, they were even more nervous now. The most important thing was that they didn't know what kind of temper Lin Yi had. Was he kind and reasonable or a bloodthirsty tyrant? If it was the former, it was good news for everyone, especially for the disciples of the local sections. But if it was the latter, it was hard to say whether it was a blessing or a curse. It was better to speak less before figuring out the situation. At this time, honest people wouldn't suffer losses. Let me tell you something. The North Island's Green Cloud sect is such a big sect that it can't be without a leader for a day. Now the highest elder is gone, and there's no news from the leader. We need someone to stand up and preside over the affairs. After all, I can't do it, can I? Linny said. Everyone looked at each other, and their eyes involuntarily fell on Chen Dongcheng. Logically speaking, he was the most qualified candidate. Chen Dongcheng suddenly felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He couldn't wait to hide now. What he feared most was being targeted by Lin Yi. How could he dare to jump out and fight for power at this time? Even if he wanted to die, he shouldn't do it this way. Well, the position of the leader can't be left vacant. Let's take this opportunity to change the leader. I suggest Xian Ijia. Lin Yi said directly. It was in the plan to let Xian Ijia preside over the affairs of the sect. Although it was a bit abrupt to bring it up rashly, and Xian Ijia's original status and strength were far from enough, with Lin Yi's current deterrent power, who dared to say no? Sure enough, the crowd did not dare to oppose him directly. However, their expressions were a little strange. Although Xian Ijia was an elder in the Gold Core stage, it was like ascending to heaven in a single bound when an elder ranked at the bottom of the rankings suddenly became the sect leader. No one objects, then it's settled. Lin Yi did not want to talk nonsense with them at all. He simply made a decision. Anyway, with him suppressing them, no one dared to oppose. It would be fine when they got used to it. The crowd was speechless. The saying, "the strong are respected," was true. No matter what decision Lin Yi made, they would not dare to show it even if they were dissatisfied. Moreover, they were familiar with Xian Ijia's character. Although they were dissatisfied, it was not a bad thing for most of them to let such a good guy take the position. They could reluctantly accept it. "Thank you, Grand Uncle Master. I will do my best and go through fire and water." Xian Ijia suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and shed tears of gratitude. It was true that he was a good man who put his own safety before things went awry, but he was also an ambitious one. Of course, he would never have dreamed that he would one day become the leader of the sect. However, ambition would grow. "All right, then I'll leave the rest to you. If there's anything, look for me at Climbing Heaven Cliff." Lin Yi did not stay any longer. He only needed to show his face in front of everyone today to shock them. As for how to deal with the aftermath, it was Xian Ijia's business. If Xian Ijia could not even handle this well, it would mean that he was in a difficult position, and he would have to find someone else. As expected, Xian Ijia's performance did not disappoint Lin Yi. Although his strength was only at the early stage of the gold core stage, this good guy's ability to handle affairs was not to be underestimated. In just a few days, he had calmed the restless people and successfully gained the support of some of the local leaders and disciples. Of course, there was still a long way to go before he could really control the overall situation. However, it was a very gratifying step for Xian Ijia. With the protection of Lin Yi, he would become the real leader of Green Cloud Sect in the North Island sooner or later. Chapter 5369. He had been missing for half a year. Before that, Xian Ijia hoped more than anyone else that the former head could come back to take charge of the situation. But now, everything was different. If Hong Zijuan came back, what should he do as the new head? Should he continue to be the head, or should he abdicate and return it to its rightful owner? If this matter was not handled well, the situation that Xian Ijia tried so hard to stabilize might be on the verge of losing control again. If the local faction split because of this, and the Chun family's faction fanned the flames again, things might get out of hand. The one who had the power to decide who should be the head was not the disciples of the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island, but Sky Climbing Cliff. Is this Hong Zijuan? Lin Yi sized up the middle-aged man, brought by Xian Ijia. His face was fair and beardless, and he looked honest and refined. His gestures occasionally revealed the aura of a superior, but it was not obvious. Instead, there was a hint of haggard and disheveled. "Greetings, Grand Uncle Master." Hong Zijuan hurriedly bowed to Lin Yi. He did not act like a head at all in front of Lin Yi. He was not a fool. Lin Yi even killed Chunjiu, the highest elder, without hesitation, let alone a weak head like him. Most importantly, things were different now. Nominally, Xian Ijia had become the new head of the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island, and he was appointed by Lin Yi in public. It was a great risk for him to come back at this time. If Lin Yi and Xian Ijia felt that he was an eyesore, he would not end up well. Although Xian Ijia was a good person, and Hong Zijuan had helped Xian Ijia before, it was about the head's position. Even brothers would fight to the death. Of course, the final decision was not up to him and Xian Ijia, but to Lin Yi. "You've been missing for so long. Where have you been?" Lin Yi looked at him and asked, "I'm ashamed to say that I've been hiding outside for the past half a year and dared not to come back. If I came back, I would be dead." Hong Zijuan smiled bitterly. "Why?" Lin Yi and Xian Ijia looked at each other. As the head of a sect, Hong Zijuan's strength was certainly not weak. He was a real master in the peak of Gold Core. Moreover, he was in the territory of Green Cloud sect on the North Island. How could his life be in danger? That's because the person who wanted to kill me was Grand Elder Qinjiu. If it wasn't for my mount desperately protecting me and delaying me for a moment, I would have been a dead man. Hong Zijuan still had a lingering fear when he talked about this matter today. No one would have thought that his own sect's Grand Elder would actually directly make a move against his own sect's head, and there was only one purpose, which was to pave the way for Chen Dongqing. No wonder we haven't heard from him for half a year. Linny nodded. That made sense. Since Hong Zijuan had taken action, as long as Qinjiu was there, Hong Zijuan wouldn't dare to come back to Green Cloud sect in the North Island. That would be courting death. That was why he suddenly showed up at this time. After all, Qinjiu had been killed by Lin Yi. For him, the biggest threat had disappeared. As the head of a sect, it was impossible for him to wander outside all the time. No matter what, he had to return to Green Cloud sect in the North Island. As the head of a sect, I only cared about my own safety. It's a great dereliction of duty. Please punish me personally, Grand Uncle. Hong Zijuan respectfully took the initiative to ask for forgiveness, and his attitude was very proper. It's not necessary. It's pardonable. Lin Yi waved his hand indifferently, but the way he looked at Hong Zijuan was a little more playful. This guy clearly knew that Lin Yi let Xian Ijie take his position, but from his attitude at this moment, he didn't complain or resent at all. Instead, he seemed to have accepted it. Of course, Hong Zijuan didn't have the guts to question Lin Yi. It wasn't hard to understand, but it was a little interesting that he took the initiative to ask for forgiveness with such a proper attitude. Thank you for your understanding, Grand Uncle, but it's a fact that I haven't done anything in the past 6 months. As the head of a sect, I haven't been in contact with anyone for so long. I'm really not qualified to be the head of a sect, and I don't have the face to continue being the head of a sect. Therefore, this important task can only fall on the shoulders of sect leader Xian. Don't worry, Grand Uncle. I'll do my best to cooperate with you and Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I'll go through fire and water to protect you. Hong Zijuan hurriedly showed his loyalty. This guy was quite smart. Lin Yi suddenly understood why Hong Zijuan came. He knew that the matter was settled, and he didn't want to get himself killed for a sect leader's position that had already become a castle in the air. Therefore, he took the initiative to clarify himself. Apart from other things, this guy really knew how to adapt to circumstances. If that's the case, then how about this? You can be the vice head from now on. You have experience and strength. We still need your help on Xian Ijie's side in the future. I hope there will be no more factional disputes in Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I don't want to hear about anyone stirring up trouble. I have high hopes for both of you. Don't let me down. Lin Yi looked at the two of them and said, yes. Both of them were overjoyed. Xian Ijie was overjoyed because he had truly secured the position of the head. As for Hong Zijuan, it was already a great thing for him to get Lin Yi's approval. Moreover, although he lost the position of the head, at least he could be the vice head. This was already a pleasant surprise, and there was nothing to be dissatisfied about. Back then, he was bullied so miserably by Qinjiu. This in itself had already proved that Hong Zijuan wasn't a tough person. If Qinjiu didn't want his life, he would have chosen to swallow his anger. Now that it was Lin Yi who was even more terrifying, his choice to lower his head seemed unexpected, but in fact, it was completely reasonable. Very good. Lin Yi smiled. He had no choice but to push Xian Ijia into the position of the head, because he was only familiar with Xian Ijia and the whole Green Cloud sect in the North Island. He wouldn't rest assured if someone else took the position. However, it was a little unrealistic for Xian Ijia to really control the overall situation in a short period of time. Hong Zijuan came at the right time. By the way, Marshal Granduncle, there's one more thing I need to report to you. Xian Ijia paused and said with a bit of shame, Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pinggan both ran away, and they took Qin Jiu's body with them. Now Qin Jiu's primordial spirit had been trapped in the space of the jade pendant by Lin Yi, and the rest of his body was no different from a corpse to others. Got it. Lin Yi didn't comment on this. In his opinion, it wasn't entirely a bad thing. After all, Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pinggan were more or less hidden dangers in the sect. As long as they were there, the Chun family's faction wouldn't completely disperse, and the fight between the factions would continue. However, once the two of them left, the Chun family's faction would be completely leaderless, and it would collapse on its own. Chapter 5370. Xian Ijia was a little worried at first, afraid that he would be punished for not doing his job well, but he didn't expect Lin Yi to be like this. He breathed out in relief. All right, you guys go. The most important thing right now is to take control of the big picture. Lin Yi waved his hand. Yes. Xian Ijia and Hong Zijuan immediately left with high spirits. Ha, fate really is messing with people. These two used to be Hong Zijuan's boss, but now he's going to be Xian Ijia's lackey, and he's still accepting it so calmly. His personality is amazing. Qintian and the others laughed. Birds of a feather flock together. They're actually the same kind of people. Their personalities are soft, and they look like good people who only care about their own safety, but they're ambitious as well. They'll only jump out and bite people when they're cornered. Now that Lin Yi bro has accepted them, of course, Hong Zijuan won't go looking for trouble. Ziyu said with a face that could see through people. Face isn't important, life is more important. Lingshan nodded. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. You guys are quite good at reading people. All right, stop slacking off here. Go train hard. All right. The group smiled. If it was their original temperament, they wouldn't have trained so diligently. However, Chun Jiu and the others had given them a direct lesson. If they weren't strong enough, they wouldn't be able to move an inch in this small world. They were all ambitious people, and they didn't want to live under Lin Yi's wings forever. After all, even if they couldn't keep up with Lin Yi's footsteps, they couldn't be a burden to Lin Yi. Central Island, Luo Mountain. Since there were no sex station here and there were wild spirit beasts, there were very few people within 10 miles, unless it was some sect training or something like that. This place was basically a no man's land. A giant eagle descended from the sky. This was the most symbolic flying spirit beast of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. It was a rare ferocious bird, even in the small primitive Jianghu. Except for the sect leader, only the highest elder with a higher status could control it. On the back of this giant vulture was none other than Qin Dongcheng, Lu Pinggan, and the unconscious Grand Supreme Elder Qinjiu, who had secretly escaped. Since he chose to sneak out of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, in essence, it was no different from betraying the sect. In this way, it was clear that they couldn't stay on the North Island any longer. The other islands were too far away, and they weren't very familiar with them. Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pinggan discussed for a long time, and finally decided to escape to the Middle Island. The ungoverned Luo Mountain was a ready-made foothold. Although the Luo Mountain was dangerous. However, one of them was at the peak of the late stage of the Golden Core Realm, while the other was at the middle stage of the Golden Core Realm. As long as they were a little more cautious, they would be able to protect themselves. Old Lou, we have to figure out what to do next. After all, we can't really stay in this ravine all the time, right? Chen Dongcheng frowned. He was from the Chen family of the North Island and had always been regarded as the successor. He was used to living in luxury since he was a child. Now he was forced to escape to the Luo Mountain. It was okay for a day or two, but he couldn't endure it for a long time. But now the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island has fallen into the hands of Lin Yi. Both of us may have been accused of betraying the sect now. If we go out rashly and are targeted by people with ulterior motives, we'll be in big trouble. Lu Pingon also had a headache. No one would want to stay in this barren land, but the problem was that betraying the sect was a first-class felony in the small, primitive Jianghu. Even if they walked out of the Middle Island, they would be beaten by everyone. What if they were encountered by the sects of the Middle Island that were on good terms with the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island? The consequences would be even more unimaginable. We still have to give it a try. We can't go on like this. If we really waste a few months, we won't be able to do anything. If it really takes a few months, just the cultivation resources for the two of us will be a big problem. Chen Dongcheng shook his head. If it was an ordinary master of the foundation establishment stage, it would be possible to get some cultivation resources. But both of them were masters above the middle stage of the gold core realm. Almost all the cultivation resources of the gold core stage in the small primitive Jianghu were in the hands of various sects and families. Not to mention the sparsely populated Luo Mountain. It was difficult to buy them in the market. The path of cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. After a long time, the strength of the two of them would inevitably decline, and then they would not be able to find peace even if they cried. How about? Lu Pingon pondered for a moment and suggested, let's simply go to another sect. With our strength, I believe that any of the primitive sects will be happy to accept us. At that time, we can spread the story of Lin Yi occupying the magpie's nest, which will inevitably attract the attention of the entire Primordial Alliance, and we will be in an invincible position. That sounds like a good idea. Chen Dongcheng nodded in agreement. He was a master at the middle stage of the gold core realm, and Lu Pingon was a master at the peak of the late stage of the gold core realm. With such strength, if they went to any of the primitive sects, they would be treated well. Of course, the premise was that they could gain the trust of the other party. Fortunately, over the years, in order to help him rise, Chun Jiu often took him to various primitive sects to show his face. Among them, there were a few who were on good terms, so it should not be a big problem to go and seek refuge. So let's go now. Lu Pingon looked at Chen Dongcheng. Although his strength was higher, he still humbled himself in front of Chen Dongcheng. After all, Chen Jiu was not really dead. If they could find a way to cure him, they would not have a hard time with the protection of this Yuanying realm old monster. There is one more question. What about my ancestor? We can't just go and seek refuge behind his back, can we? Chen Dongcheng was still frowning. Chunjiu was the greatest hope for him and Lu Pingon to turn things around. Unless it was confirmed that he was completely dead, it would be impossible to abandon him. Right now, how to settle him was a big problem. That's definitely not appropriate. Master's identity and strength are too sensitive. If we take him rashly, not to mention that few people dare to take us in, even if they do, it will inevitably give birth to all kinds of dirty ideas, which is not good. Lu Pingon shook his head. After all, if they really saved him, he would be a real Yuanying realm old monster. The Blue Cloud sect of the North Island had already staged a dove occupying a magpie's nest, and other primitive sects would not repeat the same mistake. In this case, we can only divide into two groups. One of us will go first, and the other will stay to take care of the ancestor. When everything is ready over there, we will find a way to secretly transfer the ancestor there. How about that? Chen Dongcheng said. That's a way, but who will go and who will stay? Lu Pingan looked at Chen Dongcheng. This was another problem. Although the two of them were now grasshoppers on the same rope, they could not be considered as confiding in each other. They did not know what kind of little schemes they had in their bellies. No matter who went and who stayed, there would always be various concerns. Chapter 5371. Just then, a strange voice suddenly cut in. You two don't have to worry. As long as you join us, all your worries will not be a problem. Who's that? Chen Dongcheng and Lu Pingan were shocked at the same time. Only then did they see several figures in the dense forest not far away. All of them were shrouded in black robes, looking extremely mysterious. Seeing this scene, the two of them suddenly felt their blood run cold. Although they were not nascent soul old monsters, their strength was not low. They did not expect that they would unknowingly fall into the encirclement of these people. It was incredible. Hee, you can call me Mysterious Man. The black-robed man's tone was profound. If Bing Wuching was here, she would know that this guy was the bespectacled professor. Mysterious Man, what do you want? Chen Dongcheng and Lu Pingan looked at each other, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. The other party had concealed themselves very well. They could not see their strength for a while, but they were sure that since these people could surround the two of them without anyone noticing, their strength was definitely not weak. Nothing. Since you've come to our territory, as the host, we should come over and say hello, shouldn't we? The bespectacled professor smiled. Host, the two of them could not help but be stunned. The reason why they chose the K Luo Mountain in the Middle Island as their first stop was because it was an ownerless land. Otherwise, they would not have rashly come in. When did such a group of mysterious hosts appear? We haven't been here for long, so it's normal that you haven't heard of us. After all, you're guests from the North Island, thousands of miles away. The bespectacled professor looked at the two's surprised expressions and became more and more playful. How do you know we're from the North Island? Chen Dongcheng and Lu Pingan were shocked again. They had just missed the mention of the Blue Cloud sect from the North Island when they were talking just now. They did not say anything else at all. Could it be that these people had been guarding here from the beginning? Not only do I know that you're from the North Island, but I also know your identity. Chen Dongcheng, the deputy leader of the Blue Cloud sect from the North Island, Elder Lu Pingan, and the one on the ground is Highest Elder Chinjiu. Am I right? The bespectacled professor smiled. Who on earth are you? The two of them were even more shocked. Didn't I say it just now? You can call me Mysterious Man, the bespectacled doctor paused, and then said, both of you are the victims of Lin Yi, and Lin Yi happens to be our enemy. It must be fate that you came all the way here to seek refuge. What? Do you also have a grudge with Lin Yi? The two of them were dumbfounded. They thought to themselves, what kind of people does Lin Yi have? He even has enemies in this godforsaken place. What a coincidence. Of course. Allow me to ask, do the two of you want to seek revenge on Lin Yi? Asked the bespectacled doctor. Chen Dongcheng and Lu Pingan looked at each other. Although they were full of fear towards the mysterious man in front of them, they still said truthfully, of course we want to, but we don't have the strength to do so. It's good that you have the heart. As for strength, as long as the two of you are willing to join us, you will soon have it, the bespectacled doctor persuaded. Join you? What do you mean? The two of them looked at each other. Until now, they were not even clear whether they were enemies or friends. How did they get to this point? The meaning is very clear. If the two of you join us, I can make you become old monsters in the Yuanying realm in a very short time. What do you think? The bespectacled doctor's words were shocking. Old monsters in the Yuanying realm. Hearing these words, Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pingan were completely shocked. When they came to their senses, they looked at each other as if they were looking at a monster. Was this guy's brain fried? Old monsters in the Yuanying realm were existences that could only be encountered by chance, with their qualifications, especially Qin Dongcheng. Even if they were given a few hundred years, they would not be able to reach the threshold. You don't believe me? That's simple. Anyway, you have come here. Just stay and have a look. It won't be long before you understand that what I said is true. The bespectacled doctor suddenly threw 2 elixirs to the 2 of them and said, "This is a gift for you too." Golden elixir? This was Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pingan's first reaction, but then they shook their heads and denied it. This was definitely not a golden elixir. It just looked a little similar at first glance. Of course, it is not an ordinary golden elixir, but a special improved version. As for the effect, it is at least 5 times more than an ordinary golden elixir. The bespectacled doctor laughed. The 2 of them listened with bright eyes. But after all, they did not know whether the other party was an enemy or a friend. This elixir did not feel ordinary. From the appearance alone, it was even far above an ordinary golden elixir. However, who knew if it was poison? You still don't believe me? It's okay. There should be a way to test elixirs in this small ancient world. If you two are worried, you can go out and find someone to test it. I can wait. The bespectacled doctor loosened the reins. Thank you very much. Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pingan nodded quickly. At this moment, their minds were completely focused on the elixir. They could not wait. After the bespectacled doctor left with his people, the 2 of them did not hesitate to go out on the vultures to find someone to test the elixir. Soon, the results came out. Although it was impossible to accurately identify what elixir it was certain that there was no poison in the 2 elixirs. They were very clean. This result was somewhat unexpected, but at the same time, it made the 2 of them overjoyed. Since it was not poison, it meant that there was no danger. In turn, it confirmed the mysterious man's words to a certain extent. The effect of this elixir was at least 5 times more than an ordinary golden elixir. Was this possible? Both of them had a bit of luck in their hearts. If this was the case, then they would be rich. They did not hesitate to find a place to start taking the elixir. 3 days later, the 2 of them rode the vultures back to Ke Luo Mountain. Sure enough, the bespectacled doctor was already waiting here with his people. How is it? Are you satisfied with the effect of the elixir? The bespectacled doctor smiled. Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pingan did not speak, but the momentum shown by the 2 of them at this moment was enough to explain everything. They were both in the golden elixir great perfection. In just 3 days, Lu Pingan broke through from the peak of the golden elixir late stage to the golden elixir great perfection was understandable, but Qin Dongcheng broke through from the golden elixir middle stage to the golden elixir great perfection, which was really incredible. Looking at the 2 of you, you should have discovered it, right? The bespectacled doctor continued to smile. Chapter 5372. Just as the bespectacled doctor had said, they had already discovered the faintly discernible poisonous gas in their bodies. This horrifying discovery was enough to completely extinguish their little bit of joy. Even if they were beaten to death, they would never have thought that after they had already found an appraiser, and the result was that there was clearly no poisonous substance in their bodies, there would be such a terrifying and troublesome poisonous gas left behind after eating it. Little did they know that this was a method that was integrated with the top technology of the secular world. It would be a miracle if it could be identified by the conventional appraisal methods of the ancient Jianghu. What do you want? Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pingon were a little panicked. Their strength had skyrocketed, but the price they had to pay was poisonous gas in their bodies. This was equivalent to selling themselves alive. No matter who it was, they would not be happy. They would only panic. Nothing much. Don't worry. Although the poisonous gas can't be eliminated, it won't break out in a short time. Even if it takes a long time, as long as you take the antidote regularly, it can be effectively suppressed. There won't be any problems. The bespectacled doctor said lightly. The two looked at each other. These words did not make them feel much more at ease. Instead, they became more frightened. The more stable the poison was, the more firmly the other party controlled it. What did this mysterious man want? Still worried. The bespectacled doctor looked at the two's expressions and smiled. He comforted them. My purpose has been stated from the beginning. We have a common enemy, so I need you two to join our organization. As for the strength of our organization, I believe there is no need to say more. You two should have a deep understanding of it. As long as you two cooperate well, I can help you become Yuanying stage old monsters in a very short time. Chun Dongcheng and Lu Pingon had subconsciously regarded these words as a fantasy before, but now it was different. With the previous medicinal pills as a foundation, they could be said to believe it without a doubt. On one hand, there was the temptation of a Yuanying stage old monster, and on the other hand, there was the threat of inexplicable poisonous gas. In the face of this carrot and stick, normal people would not have a second choice. Okay, I'll join. Chun Dongcheng was the first to make a decision. I'll join too. Lu Pingon was not willing to be left behind. Very good. With the help of the two of you, it will be even more convenient for us to do things in the primordial underworld in the future. It's like adding wings to a tiger. Congratulations! The mysterious person was overjoyed when he heard this. Although these two people's surrender was completely within his expectation, it still made him very happy. After all, if the center really wanted to gain a foothold in the small Jianghu of the primordial era, it had to rely heavily on the local natives. These two people were the top executives of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Whether it was experience, connections, or influence, they were far from being comparable to ordinary people. Even if they had escaped from the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, they were still very useful. I will do my utmost and dedicate my life to you. Both of them were shrewd people. Since they had already reached this step, they naturally adjusted their mentality extremely quickly, making it impeccable. However, only they themselves knew what kind of thoughts they had in their hearts. Good. The two of you have just broken through, so you need to cultivate and stabilize your realm. After a while, I believe there will be good news, the bespectacled doctor said with a profound smile. What good news? Chun Dongcheng and Lu Pingon looked at each other curiously. You'll know when the time comes. When saying this, the bespectacled doctor's eyes fell on Chenjiu, who was unconscious. For him, the joining of Chun Dongcheng and Lu Pingon was not the biggest gain. The biggest gain was the supreme elder of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. The key to mass-producing nascent soul old monsters in the future would fall on this guy. 3 months passed in a flash. Snow Sword School of the Middle Island. For Su Xiaodong, this was a special day because her most valued pro-disciple, Lang Lang, had come out of seclusion. After a few months of seclusion cultivation, Lang Lang successfully crossed the barrier between the Foundation Establishment stage and the Gold Core stage. Now she was a real master in the early stage of the Gold Core stage. As a master, Su Xiaodong herself was only in the early stage of the Gold Core stage. Now she was actually caught up by her own disciple. According to the rules of the sect, they would be on equal footing in the future. This kind of thing would inevitably be a little awkward for others, but not for Su Xiaodong. Instead, she felt very proud. It had only been a mere 1.5 years' time, but Long Long had soared from an early-stage foundation establishment realm disciple to the early-stage gold core realm expert today. Even though such an amazing performance could not be compared to Xue Jianfeng, who had a cheat code, it was still considered as shocking. No matter who taught such a disciple, he or she would be extremely proud. Not only that, with Long Lung's heaven-defying aptitude, and the various elixirs given by Lin Yi after crossing the huge barrier of the gold core stage, it was completely possible for her to return to the previous heaven-defying state of rapid breakthrough. It would take dozens or hundreds of years for others to go from the early stage of the gold core stage to the great perfection of the gold core stage, but for Long Long, even if she did not use the improved version of the elixirs with great side effects, it would not take that long. Perhaps in a few years, the Snow Sword School would have another great perfection of the gold core stage. However, before the master and disciple could have a few words, a familiar yet disgusting voice cut in. It was Xue Jianfeng. Yo, you've finally come out of isolation. It looks like you're already in the gold core stage. How rare. Xue Jianfeng walked towards the two, with an evil smile on his face. It was obvious that he did not come with good intentions. Long Lung and her master, Su Xiaodong, looked at each other and could not help but feel a little surprised. Ever since this fellow's legs were destroyed by Bing Wuqing in public, not long after that, his father, Xue Liping, sent him out to seek medical treatment. There was no news of him for a few months. They did not expect him to appear again today. There was something strange about this matter from the beginning. Logically speaking, with the injuries on his legs, the doctors in the Snow Sword School might be able to cure him. Even if they did not have the ability, they could at least give it a try. There was no need for him to go out to seek medical treatment, let alone stay out for a few months. Seeing that Long Lung and Su Xiaodong did not speak, Xue Jianfeng did not mind. He walked closer and reached out his hand to touch Long Lung's cheek. He continued with an evil smile, TSK, I haven't seen you for a few months. Junior sister, you've become more and more attractive. I can't help but feel sorry for you. Initially, I wanted to continue to pursue your past deeds, but I've changed my mind now. As long as you repent and mend your ways, I can let bygones be bygones. How about that? Repent and mend my ways. Long Lung took a step back and avoided his lecherous hand. She had already advanced into the gold core stage. Even if she was only in the early stage of the gold core stage, she was at least at the same level as the other party. She would definitely not be able to defeat him, but she would not be helpless to the extent that she could only wait for death. Chapter 53:73. Long Lung frowned and immediately prepared to use the ice prison mirror. The power of this move was enough to threaten beginner golden elixir realm experts when she was in foundation building consummation. Now that she had advanced to beginner golden elixir realm, its power had increased tenfold or even tenfold. It was enough to threaten any golden elixir realm experts, including those in gold elixir realm consummation. Especially since this was the Snow Sword faction, where she did not need to deal with Xue Jianfeng alone. Once they started fighting, they would quickly attract onlookers, and if things got out of hand, it would no longer be her problem. However, before Long Lung could make her move, a bone-chilling coldness had already enveloped Xue Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing's voice followed. Who are you talking about when you don't know what's good for you? I knew it. When Long Lung is in trouble, you, Lin Yi's damned lackey, would definitely jump out and bare your teeth. I was right. Not only was Xue Jianfeng not shocked, but the corner of his mouth curled into a smug and mocking smile, as if he had forgotten the painful lesson from last time. So, you're saying that you came prepared? Bing Wuching looked at him again. Although he did not make a move, nor did he release any terrifying aura, her intuition told her that he was no longer the same as before. Thinking of the few months that he had disappeared, anything was possible with the nature-defying skills of the core. Maybe he had already advanced to the nascent soul realm. Otherwise, with Xue Jianfeng's character of bullying the weak, he would never dare to come back to pick a fight at this time, and in such an open and above-board way. Thinking of this, Bing Wuching suddenly understood. Provoking Lung Lung to lure her out on purpose. Could it be that this guy wanted to seek revenge on her? What do you think? Xue Jianfeng did not hide it, and a ferocious look flashed across his eyes. Someone asked me to bring you a message. There is a price to pay for betrayal, and traitors will never have a good ending. I hope you are mentally prepared. Is that so? Bing Wuching's expression did not change at all. It was needless to say who the person he was talking about was. From the day he attacked Xue Jianfeng, she had already been prepared for this. She was not afraid at all. It was true that the center was unfathomable, but did that mean that Lin Yi was weak? The fact that the higher-ups in the center had repeatedly instructed their subordinates not to provoke Lin Yi was proof of Lin Yi's fearsomeness. Bing Wuching believed that Lin Yi and his backer must have the profound strength to contend with the center. This was the most logical explanation. Otherwise, he would not have joined Lin Yi's side so easily. This was a huge gamble, and a smart person like him would not bet easily. You seem to be fearless. Do you really think that you're invincible just because you've become a nascent soul cultivator? Do you think that no one can deal with you? Looking at his expression, Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Bing Wuching as if he was looking at a clown who was about to be avenged by him. So what you're trying to say is that you can deal with me? Bing Wuching's lips curled into a grin. Of course. Otherwise, wouldn't all my saliva have been wasted? Xue Jianfeng's expression became more and more smug. However, before he could make a move, his body suddenly sank. A thick layer of ice suddenly covered his entire body. Not only was it difficult for him to move, but it was also impossible for him to even lift his hand. The merciless ice aura this time was much more powerful than before. Bing Wuching's cultivation level had not improved in the past few months, and she had not taken the 2 supreme-grade golden nascent gathering pills that Lin Yi had given her. Everyone knew that more haste, less speed. However, some people could restrain themselves, while others could not. Bing Wuching, who was an absolutely rational person, naturally belonged to the former category. In terms of direct effects alone, apart from the poisonous gas, the improved version of the core elixir was indeed much more powerful than ordinary elixirs. Even the supreme-grade elixirs that Lin Yi had personally refined could not compare to it. However, there was a huge drawback, and that was that it greatly depleted one's potential. The direct consequence of this was that it would be very difficult for one to achieve breakthroughs in the future, and one's foundation would be severely lacking. Although Bing Wuching didn't rely on the core elixir to increase her strength like Xue Jianfeng, she had still taken it once. If it weren't for the fact that her natural endowment was so strong that it defied the natural order, no matter how many supreme-grade elixirs Lin Yi gave her, it would have been useless. To be honest, the fact that she was able to overcome the side effects of the core elixir in such a short period of time and successfully break through to the nascent soul realm was a result that shocked not only the outsiders, but even Lin Yi himself. However, no matter how strong and heaven-defying Bing Wuching's natural endowments were, the side effects still existed. This was not obvious when she was in the nascent soul realm, but it gradually became apparent after she advanced to the nascent soul realm. The most direct manifestation was that it was no longer as easy to achieve breakthroughs as before. With her natural endowments, she could easily achieve breakthroughs with just a few elixirs in the past, but it was not realistic now. Of course, part of the reason was that it was more difficult to achieve breakthroughs in the nascent soul realm, but the side effects were still there. Fortunately, she had that half a stalk of divine knowledge grass as a foundation, which largely mitigated this side effect. Now that she had specially stabilized it for a few months, it could basically be considered to have offset the side effects. As her strength and realm became more stable, even though they were both in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, Bing Wuqing's real strength had increased a lot compared to a few months ago. Even if she were to face a more experienced early-stage nascent soul expert of the same level, she would only be stronger. Therefore, Xue Jianfeng was very confident when he returned this time. Bing Wuqing, who had expected this, was also very confident. Humph, with such insignificant skills, you have the nerve to repeat the same trick in front of me? Xue Jianfeng, who was trapped in the ice, suddenly snorted coldly. An extremely powerful burst of vital energy erupted from his body, and the ice instantly shattered to the ground. There was no longer any obstruction. Seeing this, the expressionless Bing Wuqing's eyes suddenly widened. This guy was not in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, but the peak of the early stage. Are you scared? Xue Jianfeng was very pleased with her shocked expression. He said proudly, "How about it? Do you feel a little regretful now? Unfortunately, even if you regret it, it's too late. Once you took this step, there's no turning back." To be honest, I really didn't expect that a rational person like you, Bing Wuqing, would be so hot-headed that you would actually take this path of no return. Before I really make a move, why don't you share your thoughts? The peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm was his greatest source of confidence. In these few months, he wasn't recuperating from his injuries. Instead, he was undergoing further strengthening and upgrading. The peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm was the result of this strengthening and upgrading. Chapter 5374. However, the key that restricted them was the sample. Not only did they need a ready-made sample source, but they also needed a strong sample recipient. In the beginning, the strongest sample in the secular world was a heaven-level paragon, so the center of the secular world could only produce heaven-level paragon experts. However, when the people of the ancient underworld appeared, foundation establishment and golden core experts were no longer a problem. Now that Chen Dongcheng and Lu Pingon had brought the half-dead Chenjiu, it was only natural that they could produce nascent soul experts. Xue Jianfeng was the first test subject. As for why he could reach the peak of early-stage nascent soul, there was only one reason. Chen Jiu, who was the sample source, was at the peak of early-stage nascent soul. Path of no return? Looks like you're really confident. Bing Wuqing's eyes narrowed into slits. This was a sign that he was serious. No matter how much she looked down on Xue Jianfeng, now that he had become a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, he was definitely a formidable opponent. I'm a whole level stronger than you now. Why don't you give me a reason not to be confident? Xue Jianfeng grinned coldly and suddenly drew his sword. The speed of his sword was more than 100 times faster than when he was at Golden Core Paragon. At first glance, it looked like a beam of cold light, and in the next instant, it was already at Bing Wuqing's throat. No one could have imagined that Xue Jianfeng would so openly kill Bing Wuqing in broad daylight. One must know that even when Bing Wuqing had seized the opportunity to turn against him previously, it was only to punish him. This fellow was a classic example of a vile person who would seek revenge whenever he had a grudge. Cold and Su Xiaodong's eyelids twitched at the sight, and they immediately broke out in cold sweat for Bing Wuqing. However, this was a battle between nascent soul experts, and they were only at the early-stage Golden Core experts, so they could not interfere at all. Fortunately, Xue Jianfeng's sword stopped at the last moment. It was not that he had deliberately withdrawn his strength, but that there was an additional layer of ice between the tip of his sword and Bing Wuqing's throat. What was different was that this layer of ice was an eerie black. Clang! With a crisp sound similar to metal colliding, Xue Jianfeng's sword was deflected by this layer of black ice, which shocked the arrogant Xue Jianfeng. He was now a peak early-stage, nascent soul expert. How could he not break the defense of an early-stage, nascent soul expert when he went all out? Especially when this layer of black ice appeared. It made people's hair stand on end. What kind of evil technique was this? Your level has indeed increased by quite a bit, but unfortunately, your strength has not increased by much. Your sword is a bit unsteady, Bing Wuqing said calmly. Not only was there not the slightest hint of panic in her expression, it was as if she had seen through her opponent's background with this sword strike and regained her confidence. Xue Jianfeng's attack was indeed fast, so fast that he couldn't even react in time. However, the tip of the sword began to drift in the end. This was a sign of an unstable realm and insufficient foundation. No matter how nature-defying the technique was, it was not surprising that Xue Jianfeng would suffer from this after forcefully turning him into an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm in such a short period of time. Otherwise, it would not have been easy for Bing Wuqing to block his sudden attack. Humph! Stop putting on an act. Although that was what he said, Xue Jianfeng began to feel a little diffident. All this while, Bing Wuqing had always been superior to him. Even though she was superior to him now, he actually did not have much confidence. After all, he was not a fool. He knew better than anyone the drawbacks of the improved elixirs, especially when he had just become an expert at the peak early-stage nascent soul realm. Against Bing Wuqing, an expert at the early-stage nascent soul realm, there was a risk that he would fail miserably. At the end of the day, Xue Jianfeng would always feel inferior in front of a true peerless genius like Bing Wuqing. It was just that he was deceiving himself and refused to admit it no matter what. Whether I'm putting on airs or not, we'll know once we fight. Bing Wuqing's tone was very unyielding, unlike the shock she had shown just now. The way she looked at Xue Jianfeng now was filled with aggression, just like how a vicious wolf would look at an injured leopard. Before the leopard was injured, the vicious wolf might have retreated, but now that it had seen through the leopard, the tables had turned. Being stared at like that, Xue Jianfeng felt his scalp go numb for a moment, and he even took half a step back subconsciously. However, he quickly regained his senses and forced a cold laugh. Humph, you sure sound arrogant. Let's see if you have what it takes. Bing Wuqing did not speak, but answered him with her actions. A pitch-black ice sword appeared soundlessly in her hand, emitting an unparalleled mysterious aura. It seemed sacred and solemn, yet evil and ruthless at the same time. It was hard to fathom, but it made one's heart palpitate. Xue Jianfeng's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. Black ice again. Before today, he had never seen such a move from Bing Wuqing. Judging from the situation just now, this was obviously her trump card, and its power must be extraordinary. Just as they were about to fight, a group of people hurried over from afar, and Hong Qingyuan's voice rang out. Wait, let's talk this out. It was not just sect leader Hong Qingyuan who had come. Great Elder Qi Qianqiu and the other members of the Elders Guild had arrived as well. They could not help but feel nervous. This was a battle between two nascent soul realm old monsters, and once they got serious, it would be a huge disaster for the entire Snow Sword sect. Not to mention that Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing were both members of the Snow Sword sect. To a primordial sect, every nascent soul realm old monster was an invaluable asset. They did not want the Snow Sword sect to lose any of them for nothing, especially if both sides were to suffer heavy losses. Humph, your reinforcements are here. Xue Jianfeng was already in a difficult position, and he was clearly frightened by Bing Wuqing's stance. Now that he had found a way out, he pretended to be magnanimous and said, "Considering that you and I are from the same sect, and considering the bigger picture, I'll remember what you did last time. You'd better know your place in front of me in the future." Pretentious. Bing Wuqing looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot, but she did not make a move forcefully. Her priority was to protect Cold Lung, and it would be detrimental to Cold Lung's safety if they really fought here. Hong Qingyuan and the others breathed a sigh of relief when they saw this. On one hand, they were still shocked by Xue Jianfeng's strength, and on the other hand, they were genuinely worried. If the two of them were to really fight without a care in the world, they would not even dare to stop them. If they dared to interfere in the battle between two nascent soul realm old monsters, even Hong Qingyuan, who was at Golden Core great perfection, would only end up as cannon fodder. Chapter 5375. Hong Qingyuan and the others looked at each other. Last time, Bing Wuqing had taken matters into her own hands and got herself a permanent Great Supreme Elder, and they hadn't even had the time to report it to the Great Supreme Elder. Now, she had gotten herself a permanent Great Supreme Elder. What the hell was this? Although they criticized her in their hearts, she was now an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm. They, including Hong Qingyuan, had no room to bargain. No matter what she asked, the only thing they could do was to listen obediently. All right, it's settled then. Xue Jianfeng made his decision. Hong Qingyuan and the others all looked at Bing Wuqing. He was the only one who had the right to speak up and object at a time like this. Xue Jianfeng, the first Executive Grand Supreme Elder, was obviously trying to ride on his head. The one who had the biggest reaction to this was definitely him. However, Bing Wuqing was completely indifferent. She didn't even have the intention to speak. She just looked at Xue Jianfeng with a sneer in her eyes, as if she wasn't interested. Soon, Xue Jianfeng, Hong Qingyuan, and the others left one after another. When they were far away, Bing Wuqing turned to Long Lung and reminded, based on this guy's character, he won't let this go easily. Be careful for the next few days, and avoid him if you can. Got it. Lung Lung nodded. Because she had just advanced to the Golden Core realm, she needed to stabilize her realm. She just needed to find a slightly more secluded place. Moreover, with Bing Wuqing as a deterrent, Xue Jianfeng didn't dare to be too unbridled. Little did he know that Bing Wuqing herself was feeling very weak at this moment. Although she looked like she was going to defeat Xue Jianfeng, it was actually just a bluff. The sudden appearance of Hong Qingyuan and the others was not so much to give Xue Jianfeng a way out, but to say that it had helped him out of his predicament. The black ice that Xue Jianfeng was most afraid of was indeed a killer weapon that he had recently cultivated. Unfortunately, it was far from being fully formed. Its effect in actual combat was very limited, which could not be concealed once they started fighting. Fortunately, Xue Jianfeng was frightened. Bing Wuqing had originally planned to continue stabilizing her realm for a while, but now she couldn't. Facing Xue Jianfeng, a peak early nascent soul realm expert who had suddenly appeared, she had to improve her strength as soon as possible. She was very clear that Xue Jianfeng wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. He might be able to scare them this time, but he might not be able to do so the next time. Fortunately, she still had the 2 supreme-grade golden nascent condensation pills that Lin Yi had given her. In addition, she had been stabilizing herself during this period of time. As long as she went into seclusion for a period of time, Bing Wuqing was confident that she could elevate her realm by 1 level. If she was lucky, she might even elevate 2 levels in a row. At that time, he would have enough strength to use the black cold ice. Xue Jianfeng would naturally not be a threat to him. Bing Wuqing was never one to procrastinate. Once she had made up her mind, she immediately went into seclusion. For 3 consecutive days, everything was peaceful. However, this peace was soon broken. Xue Jianfeng took much earlier than Bing Wuqing had expected, and he did not manage to see through the black ice. But he could tell that Bing Wuqing was putting on an act. Otherwise, with Bing Wuqing's extremely pragmatic nature, as long as she had enough power, she would not have swallowed her pride like this. Especially when he realized that Lung Lung had disappeared without a trace and Bing Wuqing had gone into closed-door cultivation. Xue Jianfeng felt even more strongly that he had been tricked. His first reaction in anger and humiliation was to barge into Bing Wuqing's cave abode. Anyone who went into closed-door cultivation would activate a defensive formation to prevent outsiders from invading, and Bing Wuqing's cave abode was no exception. Unfortunately, the defensive formation here was not of a high level. At most, it could withstand the attack of a golden core perfected expert. In front of a nascent soul old monster, it was practically non-existent, let alone Xue Jianfeng. Xue Jianfeng's sudden barge was far beyond Bing Wuqing's expectations. He was at a crucial point in his closed-door cultivation. He had suffered a great loss in just one encounter. If he had not barely released the heartless ice force at the last moment to delay the other party for a moment, he would have been killed instantly. Otherwise, he would practically be killed in an instant. This time, Xue Jianfeng had truly unleashed his killing intent. However, Bing Wuqing was Bing Wuqing after all. Even though she had been viciously tricked by Xue Jianfeng, she was still able to escape death by herself and escape with serious injuries. The Snow Sword School was in an uproar when the news came out. Hong Qingyuan and the others almost went crazy when they heard about it. Many of them were people who prioritized the interests of the school above everything else. Before this, they were all looking forward to a glorious future. Xue Jianfeng, Bing Wuqing, and the original Grand Supreme Elder made up a total of 3 nascent soul old monsters. Such a luxurious, top-notch configuration had already surpassed the level of all the 10 small sects and families. They could even begin to challenge the legendary 4 big sects, which were the true supreme rulers of the ancient underworld. Once they became one of the 4 big sects and families, it would be a brand new era for the entire Snow Sword School. They were about to make history. Little did they expect that before they could realize this beautiful dream, Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing would start fighting again. This time, Bing Wuqing was seriously injured, so much so that she finally escaped from the Snow Sword School with all her might. Her whereabouts were unknown. Elder Xue, can you please explain to us what is going on? Hong Qingyuan asked, suppressing his anger. If the other party was not a nascent soul old monster, he would not even want to speak right now. He would have been punished according to the school rules. Unfortunately, all the school rules were set for those below the sect leader. For a nascent soul old monster like Xue Jianfeng, all the school rules were nothing but a fart. What is going on? You even need to ask? Bing Wuqing betrayed the school. It's that simple. Because of his strength, Xue Jianfeng no longer cared about Hong Qingyuan and the others. He did not even bother to make up an excuse for this kind of thing. He could deal with it with just a few words. Hong Qingyuan and the others all had a strange expression, as if they were constipated. Even if 10,000 alpacas were galloping in their hearts, they would not dare to refute him directly. Also, where did Cold go? Find her at all costs. Xue Jianfeng directly ordered everyone, then added, spread the word. If I don't see her by sunset today, then I will punish her master, Su Xiaodong. His words caused the expressions of Hong Qingyuan and the others to change drastically again. Not only did they not feel the joy brought about by three nascent soul old monsters, but they were all anxious. Xue Jianfeng was acting so unbridled. He was prepared to become the local tyrant of the entire Snow Sword School. Chapter 5376. Under Xue Jianfeng's tyrannical power, everyone from sect leader Hong Qingyuan to ordinary Snow Sword sect disciples could only look at each other in silence. Su Xiaodong was captured and tied to the execution platform in public. The result was not out of Xue Jianfeng's expectations. Lung Lung, who had disappeared after hearing that her master was in trouble, appeared before the sky turned dark. "I'm here. Can you let go of my master now?" Lung Lung looked straight at Xue Jianfeng on the platform. "Huh, the relationship between master and disciple is really touching. But when did I say that I would let go of your master if you came?" Xue Jianfeng smiled evilly. "What do you want?" Lung Lung was not surprised. "Nothing much. Even if I told you to give in right now, I don't think you'd agree to it. But it's fine, I'm patient. You'll understand when Lin Yi's unlucky, and I won't have to say anything then." Xue Jianfeng looked very confident, and then sneered. "What you have to do now is very simple. Stand with your master. If Bing Wuqing still remembers the mission Lin Yi gave her, I think she'll show herself." Compared to Lung Lung, Xue Jianfeng paid more attention to Bing Wuqing. After all, she was the one who could really pose a fatal threat to him. Now that he had managed to seriously injure her, he had to take this opportunity to eliminate her. Lung Lung was nothing in comparison. Although that was what he said, Xue Jianfeng had no idea whether Bing Wuqing would show up or not. He knew very well that she was an extremely rational and realistic person. Since she knew that she would be courting death by coming back, the possibility of her showing up on her own was really not high. The result was out of Xue Jianfeng's expectation. Bing Wuqing appeared before his patience had even begun to wear off. "How rare! How rare! I didn't think that a cold-faced guy like you would be so loyal to Lin Yi, coming back to die for his woman. Should I say that you're noble, or should I say that you're stupid?" Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but be overjoyed. Lung Lung was also very surprised by this. Although she already knew that Bing Wuqing was one of them, there was not much substantial interaction between them. She never knew that Bing Wuqing's loyalty to Lin Yi was to such an extent. It was truly impressive. "I'm not noble or stupid," Bing Wuqing answered. "Oh, why did you come back when it was clearly a suicide mission? Don't tell me you think you can escape alive." Xue Jianfeng did not hide his murderous intent at all. Now that Bing Wuqing was severely injured, no one else from the Snow Sword faction dared to stop him. Today was the day Bing Wuqing would die. Yes. Bing Wuqing's answer was short and forceful. "Interesting, let's give it a try." The corners of Xue Jianfeng's lips curled up. It was true that he had been intimidated by the other party previously, but now he had seen through the other party's false bravado. Furthermore, Bing Wuqing was seriously injured. If he couldn't kill her even with this, he might as well find a piece of tofu and kill himself. "Sure, let's give it a try," someone responded, but it wasn't Bing Wuqing's voice. Hearing this voice, Xue Jianfeng's expression instantly changed. Lung Ling's expression also changed greatly. However, the former's expression became extremely unsightly, while the latter was overjoyed. No one would have thought that Lin Yi would actually show up at Middle Island at this time. This was purely a coincidence. The reason why Lin Yi appeared here was purely because the situation at Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island was almost under control, so he came to Middle Island to visit Lung Lung. He didn't expect to run into this matter. "I didn't expect that after not seeing you for just a few months, your wings have hardened." You're not simple. Lin Yi looked at Xue Jianfeng, who was standing on the high platform. His expression was neither happy nor sad, making it impossible for others to guess what he was thinking, because the lesson from last time was still fresh in his mind. Even though Xue Jianfeng had now become a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, which was completely different from how he used to be, he still subconsciously trembled when he was looked at by Lin Yi. However, this instinctive and inexplicable uneasiness was quickly suppressed by Xue Jianfeng, now that he was already at the peak early-stage nascent soul. If he was still afraid of Lin Yi, who was merely in the foundation building stage, wouldn't he be laughed at by others? Ha 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 ha, what a good day today. I can't believe there's such a pleasant surprise. Bing Wuqing, you've done a good job. You're really a guy who knows how to adapt to the circumstances. You're really good at changing the rudder when the wind blows. Xue Jianfeng laughed and looked at Bing Wuqing with a face full of praise, giving people the impression that Bing Wuqing had listened to his instructions and deliberately led Lin Yi to his death. He had never forgotten the great shame that Lin Yi had brought him before. Originally, he thought that he would at least have a chance to avenge himself when he went to the North Island, but he didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to come to his door at this time. That being said, Xue Jianfeng didn't have the guts to really kill Lin Yi in broad daylight. After all, it was a serious matter. Not only he, but even the bespectacled doctor above him couldn't bear it. But as long as no one was killed, it shouldn't be a problem to give him a good punishment. Bing Wuqing ignored him. She didn't even have the mood to talk to such a low-level person who was trying to drive a wedge between them. If Lin Yi took the bait so easily, it could only mean that he was blind. Bing Wuqing had never thought of herself as a blind, disabled person. Lin Yi also ignored him and walked directly toward the other party. Bing Wuqing wanted to follow him, but he waved his hand to stop her. Just watch the show. There's no need to be so nervous when dealing with this kind of trash. Xue Jianfeng didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed and snorted. You talk big. People who don't know you might think you're some old, nascent soul realm monster. Hee hee, there's really no one who can act like you. To tell you the truth, I'm not a person who likes to show off. Most of the time, I'm just doing normal things like killing an ant with a wave of my hand. But in the eyes of people like you, I'm just showing off. Don't you think that's unfair? Killing an ant? Who's an ant? Do you mean that I, an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, am just an ant in your eyes? Ha 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 ha. Xue Jianfeng laughed maniacally at the sky, laughing so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. After a long while, he finally straightened his body and mocked. Looks like I wasn't wrong at all. You're not just acting cool, you're even acting swollen. Whatever you say. Now you can kneel. Lin Yi's tone wasn't aggressive at all. It was calm as usual, as if it was a matter of course. Chapter 5377. Lin Yi had inexplicably asked Xue Jianfeng, a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, to kneel. Was this guy an idiot? Where did his confidence come from? At this time, Lin Yi was only 5 steps away from him. Xue Jianfeng had already made up his mind to make Lin Yi suffer. In a fit of rage, he unsheathed his snow sword without hesitation. With a flash of sword light, it was pressed against Lin Yi's throat. The scene was exactly the same as when he was dealing with Bing Wuqing. Lung and Bing Wuqing's eyelids twitched when they saw this scene. They had to admit that this guy's sword speed after advancing to the peak early stage nascent soul realm was a little too fast. Although there were other drawbacks, such as the tip of the sword being shaky and the lack of power, the speed of the sword itself was extremely terrifying. When one's speed reached a certain degree, it would become an unbreakable technique. Even though Xue Jianfeng's sword had yet to reach the pinnacle of speed, it had undoubtedly reached the pinnacle in the eyes of the minor pugilistic world. After all, this fellow could be considered a genius. His aptitude was not fake. Xue Jianfeng had never thought of finishing off Lin Yi with a single strike. This was actually just a test. He wanted to let Lin Yi have a taste of the feeling of brushing shoulders with the god of death. He wanted Lin Yi to make a fool of himself in front of everyone. In his opinion, the show had only just begun. Unfortunately, the show that he had anticipated had only just begun. To be precise, it had already ended before it had even begun. Xue Jianfeng's sword was fast, but Lin Yi's soul-reaping hand was even faster. At the moment when he struck, a soul-reaping hand with black gas had already appeared above his head. His entire primordial spirit was instantly controlled, and then slowly pulled out of his physical body. One had to know that even Chenjiu, the sample source, could not resist Lin Yi's soul-reaping hand, not to mention Xue Jianfeng, a peak early-stage nascent soul expert who relied purely on imitation. In front of the soul-reaping hand, he was nothing but a fart. Plop! Before his primordial spirit was completely pulled out of his physical body, Xue Jianfeng hurriedly knelt down without hesitation. In the face of death, face and hatred were all meaningless. Begging for mercy was the most important thing. Everyone was speechless. At this time, Hong Qingyuan and the others had already rushed over after hearing the news. It was just that they had no way of interfering in Xue Jianfeng's matter, nor did they feel that with Xue Jianfeng's strength, he would be at a disadvantage. They never imagined that it would actually be such an outcome. Xue Jianfeng actually really knelt down. Everyone looked at Lin Yi with incomparable shock and doubt. Who exactly was this person? In fact, even Bing Wuqing was shocked at this moment. She had thought that Lin Yi would be able to deal with Xue Jianfeng. Otherwise, with Lin Yi's style, he would not have come forward so rashly if he did not have enough confidence. However, the scene of him forcing Xue Jianfeng to his knees with such ease really refreshed Bing Wuqing's worldview. Wasn't this boss of hers a little too strong and unreasonable? Ha! You're quite sensible in the face of death. Seeing this, Lin Yi smiled. Seeing that Xue Jianfeng had been scared to the point of wetting his pants, he then released his primordial spirit, allowing him to escape. After all, this was the territory of the Snow Sword faction. Even if it was for Lung Lung's sake, Lin Yi could not directly kill Xue Jianfeng as soon as he arrived. Moreover, the unfathomable core was involved. Lin Yi did not plan to take the initiative to fire the first shot yet. Naturally, he would not mess up his rhythm just because of a mere Xue Jianfeng. When the primordial spirit returned to his physical body, Xue Jianfeng's face turned pale. Although he did not seem to be injured at first glance, in fact, having the primordial spirit forcibly extracted from the physical body was a very damaging thing to his vitality, especially since Xue Jianfeng was an expert who relied on the core's techniques to forcefully reach his current level. In this aspect, primordial spirit was completely weak, so the impact was even greater. Without a few months' time, Xue Jianfeng would not be able to recover to his peak state. I have eyes but failed to see. Please be magnanimous and let me go. I won't dare to do such a stupid thing again. I won't dare to do it again. Xue Jianfeng hurriedly begged for mercy while trembling with fear. He almost buried his head into the ground. After all, he was not a fool. Although Lin Yi had released his primordial spirit, with Lin Yi's technique just now, killing him was almost a matter of a thought. In order to live, he had no choice but to beg for mercy. Is that so? But why do I remember that I just taught you a lesson a few months ago? Now, you don't recognize me anymore. What if you go back on your words in the future? I don't trust a guy with a criminal record like you. Lin Yi looked down at him from above. This Shui Jianfeng crawled on the ground. Instantly, he was sweating profusely. He did not even have the chance to refute this kind of thing. He could only beg with all his might, "Please believe me. I really won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. Elder Shui, please forgive me if I have offended you in any way. I represent all the disciples of the Snow Sword sect in gratitude." Hong Qingyuan also came forward with a group of elders to plead for mercy. No matter what, Shui Jianfeng was still a member of the Snow Sword sect. Moreover, he was a nascent soul realm old monster that they needed to rely on in the future. If he were to die in the hands of Lin Yi, it would be an incomparably huge loss to the entire Snow Sword sect. They could not afford it. Lin Yi glanced at them, then pouted at Shui Jianfeng on the ground and said, "They are pleading for you. This is a way to step down. Aren't you going to do something?" "Do something?" Shui Jianfeng was stunned. "Nonsense. You went back on your words and went against me. You want me to let you go without paying a price. Do you really think I'm easy to fool? Or do you think I won't kill you?" Lin Yi snorted coldly. Feeling the murderous intent that was gradually being released from the other party, Shui Jianfeng could not help but shrink his neck. People's minds always turned especially fast in this kind of life and death situation. He immediately understood what Lin Yi meant. Last time, Lin Yi let him go because he handed over half of the divine sense grass. So, it was clear that if he wanted to live this time, he would have to pay a sufficient price. "But I don't have the divine sense grass anymore," Shui Jianfeng said bitterly, then changed to something else. "If you don't have anything decent, then cripple one of your arms. It'll be a good lesson for you." Lin Yi said casually. Shui Jianfeng's face was bitter. If he wanted to satisfy Lin Yi, he needed at least a treasure on the level of the divine sense grass. How could he take it out in such a short time? "I never repeat myself. If you can't take out something decent, then cripple one of your arms. Otherwise, if I do it myself, you won't be able to get away so easily," Lin Yi said indifferently. Chapter 5378. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Shui Jianfeng's face turned red. Seeing that Lin Yi's murderous intent was getting stronger and stronger, he had no choice but to clench his teeth and cripple his left arm. This should be enough," Shui Jianfeng said, enduring the pain. "Scram. If there's a next time, you won't have to kneel." As Lin Yi spoke, he sent Shui Jianfeng flying with a kick in front of everyone. If this happened again, it would be Shui Jianfeng's death date. At that time, even if he didn't want to start a war with the center, he definitely wouldn't let this scourge live. Shui Jianfeng retreated in a hurry with the help of Shui Liping. Everyone's attention once again fell on Lin Yi. Witnessing this scene, Hong Qingyuan and the others were shocked and in awe. They did not dare to have any other thoughts. This person was too terrifying. "I am the sect leader of Snow Sword sect, Hong Qingyuan. May I know your name, and what orders do you have for my sect?" Hong Qingyuan braced himself and asked on behalf of the crowd. "My name is Lin Yi. As for my identity, I am now the Grand Master of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. You don't have to restrain me like this. I'm here to visit Lung Lung and Wu Qing." "There's nothing else," Lin Yi answered casually. Although they had already guessed it, hearing it from Lin Yi's mouth still shocked everyone. The way they looked at Lung Lung and Bing Wuqing changed a little, thinking to themselves that it was no wonder these two had improved so much in such a short period of time. It turned out that they had found such a powerful backer outside. This was incredible. At this moment, the elders, including Hong Qingyuan, could not help but break out in a cold sweat. It was fortunate that they did not offend Lung Lung before. Otherwise, if they had been like Xue Jianfeng and called him a traitorous disciple, they would have followed in Xue Jianfeng's footsteps, or even worse. After all, they did not have Xue Jianfeng's strength. If Xue Jianfeng was an ant in front of Lin Yi, then everyone present was not even an ant. They could only be regarded as dust. So it's the martial granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. It's an honor to meet you. Please forgive us. Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly saluted to Lin Yi together. Their attitude was even more humble than that of the people of Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Although they were from the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island and had nothing to do with the Snow Sword sect in the Middle Island, they should have the awareness of dust. Not to mention other aspects. At least they had to show their attitude on the surface. Ignorance is not a crime. Besides, I'm here as a private person, so there's no need for all these formalities. Lin Yi paused for a moment before saying, as an outsider, I shouldn't be able to comment on the matters of your Snow Sword School. However, since it's related to cold, I still have to ask, is she a traitor disciple of your school? Of course not, Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly denied. If she's not, then why didn't anyone stand up to stop Xue Jianfeng from treating her like this? Does the Snow Sword School not even have this basic rule? Lin Yi frowned and said, this, Hong Qingyuan, and the others could only look at each other and smile bitterly. If they had the strength to stop Xue Jianfeng, they would not have allowed Xue Jianfeng to be so unscrupulous. But he was a nascent soul old monster, and even Bing Wuqing was seriously injured. What could they do? You're one of the 10 small sects and families after all. It's a bit embarrassing for you to act like this. Lin Yi taunted them mercilessly. To be honest, he was suppressing his anger at the moment. Luckily, he happened to be here. Otherwise, if something really happened to Cold, Xue Jianfeng would naturally be the culprit, but these incompetent higher-ups of the Snow Sword School would not be able to escape the title of accomplice. At that time, the entire Snow Sword School would have to bear his anger. We've embarrassed ourselves in front of you, Senior. Hong Qingyuan and the others collectively sweated. Although the other party's words were unpleasant, they indeed could not refute. No matter how powerful Xue Jianfeng's strength was, they were the actual decision-makers of the sect's affairs, according to the ancestral teachings. Unless it was a major event that concerned the survival of the sect, the Supreme Elders could not interfere with the sect's affairs. Just from this point alone, the entire higher-ups of the Elders Guild were collectively derelict in their duties. Logically speaking, I shouldn't say this as an outsider, but Cold and I have a special relationship. I don't want anything to happen to her. Otherwise, he did not finish his words, but the meaning was clear. Lin Yi smiled and said, speaking of which, I have a bit of a relationship with your Snow Sword School. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I don't want to make things unpleasant. Is that okay? Yes, yes. We'll keep your instructions in mind. Senior, Hong Qingyuan, and the others hurriedly responded, but they were a little confused. This senior granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island actually said that he had a bit of a relationship with our Snow Sword School. What did that mean? Little did they know that the so-called relationship Lin Yi mentioned was actually with the Snow Sword School on the Heaven Island. After all, Sydney had stayed in the Snow Sword School before, and even Wei Xinjin was a member of the Snow Sword School. Lin Yi was treated as a distinguished guest by Hong Qingyuan and the others. They were all extremely respectful, even more humble than when they were facing Xue Jianfeng. This not only showed that Xue Jianfeng's popularity was too poor, but it also fully reflected the philosophy of the ancient Jianghu, which was to respect the strong. On the other side, Xue Jianfeng, who had escaped a calamity, did not hide away to heal his wounds, nor did he go to find the glasses doctor and the others. Instead, he went straight to the forbidden area of the Snow Sword School, the Snowy Peak. As one of the 10 small sects and clans, the territory controlled by the Snow Sword School was naturally not small, and the Snowy Peak was the highest peak within a radius of 100 miles. Strange mountains and rocks towered into the sky. The peak was covered in snow all year round, and the temperature was extremely low, let alone ordinary people. This place was definitely a forbidden area for Foundation establishment experts. Even the Golden Core experts could not last long. This place was the activity territory of the nascent soul old monsters. Before the rise of Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing, there was only one nascent soul old monster in the entire Snow Sword School, and that was the Grand Elder Yu Taitsong. Without Yu Taitsong's approval, other than the sect leader Hong Qingyuan, no one dared to trespass the Snowy Peak. However, Xue Jianfeng clearly did not care about this little rule. He did not come before because he did not want to. After all, the environment on the Snowy Peak was so harsh, and it was better to be tyrannical down there than to come up and suffer. But now, the situation was different. Because of the existence of Lin Yi, this place was probably the safest place in the entire Snow Sword School for him. Unless Lin Yi deliberately wanted to shed all pretenses of cordiality with Xue Jianfeng, he could not possibly barge into the forbidden area to find trouble with him, right? Chapter 5379. Xue Jianfeng's main mission this time was to execute the traitor Bing Wuqing. But now that Bing Wuqing was not dead, he was forced to cripple his own arm. How was he going to explain this when he returned? Humph, Lin Yi can't stay here forever. I'll hide first. When he leaves, I'll settle the score with that dead face. And Lung. Xue Jianfeng gritted his teeth. Although he was extremely unwilling, in front of Lin Yi's tyranny, he could only choose to endure the humiliation. However, before Xue Jianfeng could properly rest, a powerful aura from the top of the mountain had already enveloped him. Xue Jianfeng's heart suddenly trembled. This aura was actually stronger than his. It seemed to be at least mid-stage nascent soul. No, it should be mid-stage peak. Yu Taitsong? After seeing the appearance of the person, Xue Jianfeng almost blurted out. This person was the great elder Yu Taitsong. But wasn't this old man always in seclusion? Why did he suddenly come out? Nascent soul old monster, who are you? How dare you break into my Snow Sword sect's forbidden area? Yu Taitsong was equally shocked after sensing the other person's aura. His first reaction was that the Snow Sword sect had been invaded and even exterminated. After all, the other party had even sent out a nascent soul old monster. That was definitely a situation where they would not rest until they were dead. In the entire Snow Sword sect, who else but him could deal with a nascent soul old monster? But after being stunned for a moment, Yu Taitsong quickly reacted. This person in front of him was not an outsider. After all, Xue Jianfeng was once a representative figure of the Snow Sword sect. As a great elder, he had seen him several times and could not completely not recognize him. Elder Yu, you've come out of seclusion? Xue Jianfeng also reacted and quickly corrected himself. His strength was only at the bottom of the early stage nascent soul realm, but this person in front of him was a true mid-stage nascent soul realm expert. How would he dare to be the slightest bit disrespectful? You are Xue Jianfeng? What's going on? How did you suddenly become a peak, early stage, nascent soul realm expert? Yu Taitsong was dumbfounded. In less than 2 years, he had gone from foundation, establishment, great perfection to nascent soul realm peak. This kind of thing really overturned his worldview. Normal people would not be able to accept it. This is a long story. There are some fortuitous encounters that ordinary people can't imagine. Of course, the most important thing is still my own extraordinary talent. I'll tell Elder Yu in detail in the future. Shui Jianfeng evaded the important and dwelled on the trivial. Super talent. Yu Taitsong didn't hide his suspicions at all. Shui Jianfeng's natural endowments were indeed not bad, but in his eyes, he was far from being nature-defying. At least, he couldn't be compared to Bing Wuqing. What kind of nature-defying opportunity did this brat get? Let's not talk about this first. Elder Yu, our Snow Sword School is in big trouble. Shui Jianfeng rolled his eyes and pretended to be anxious. What big trouble? Yu Taitsong was originally prepared to question Shui Jianfeng, but his attention was immediately diverted. After taking a look at Shui Jianfeng's left arm, he asked in a deep voice, "You were injured by someone?" To be able to injure Shui Jianfeng, an existence at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, that person's strength absolutely could not be underestimated no matter how one looked at it. If they were not careful, it might be a great crisis that could lead to the annihilation of their clan. Yes, the one who injured me was the newly emerged immemorial Grand Master of the Blue Cloud clan in the North Island. This person is called Lin Yi. He colluded with the traitorous disciples of our Snow Sword School, Lung Lung and Bing Wuqing. Not only did they find an opportunity to injure me, but they also worked from the inside and outside to control the entire sect. Shui Jianfeng took the opportunity to fan the flames. His plan was very simple. Since he couldn't defeat Lin Yi, then he might as well provoke this peak of the middle nascent soul, realm Yu Taitsong into action. It would be best if he won, but there was no loss if he lost. There's actually such a thing. Yu Taitsong fell for it as expected. Hearing that, he was instantly enraged. There was actually someone who dared to collude with the traitorous disciples to control the Snow Sword School. How could this be tolerated? However, before Shui Jianfeng could rejoice, Yu Taitsong immediately retracted his anger. Looking him up and down, he said in an unfathomable tone, "You can't be deceiving this old man, right? How could that be? Whether what I said is true or false, with Elder Yu's intelligence, you only need to go down and casually walk around. What's the point of me lying to you here?" Shui Jianfeng said without changing his expression. "Is that so?" Yu Taitsong was skeptical. After all, he was an old monster who had become shrewd with age. No matter how good Shui Jianfeng's expression was, he could not hide some extremely minute flaws. However, Yu Taitsong could also feel that the other party's words were half true and half false. At least he could be sure that the strength of that Blue Cloud clan in the North Island, Lin Yi, was definitely not to be underestimated. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to injure Shui Jianfeng's arm. It's absolutely true. If this goes on, our Snow Sword School will completely fall into the hands of outsiders. You, the pillar of stability, must not ignore this. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly advised. Even if it's really as you said, I'm afraid I'm also powerless right now. Yu Taitsong laughed bitterly. If he heard these words under normal circumstances, regardless of whether it was true or false, he would definitely go down the mountain to verify it. But now was really not the time. Shui Jianfeng suddenly choked. In fact, he was not so naive as to think that he could completely bluff Yu Taitsong with just a few words. In his plan, as long as Yu Taitsong went down the mountain and saw him, he would definitely fight with Lin Yi. After all, no matter what, it was an undeniable fact that Lin Yi had interfered with the internal affairs of the Snow Sword School. It was also a fact that he had colluded with Lung Lung and Bing Wuqing. And in the eyes of the people in charge of the school, either one of these two things was an unforgivable felony. Why? Shui Jianfeng asked unwillingly. It was rare for a fighter to come to his door. He did not want to let it go so easily. Because I've just come out of seclusion. Yu Taitsong glanced at him. Isn't this just right? Let elder you exercise your hands and feet, and let everyone have a good look at your newly increased strength. Shui Jianfeng still did not give up. The problem is that my seclusion this time failed. Not only did I not advance to the next level, but I also suffered a not light backlash. Yu Taitsong shook his head with a bitter smile. He had already been in seclusion for a full 3 years. The effort he had put in was not little. His goal was to break through to the late nascent soul stage. But the result was that he failed to break through and was injured by the backlash. It really made him feel depressed and want to vomit blood, although he had not met Linny face to face. Since the other party could cripple Shui Jianfeng's left arm, it could be imagined that his strength must be above the peak of the early nascent soul stage. Even the most conservative would be the middle nascent soul stage. With his current state, he might not be able to gain an advantage, and might even suffer a big loss. The older one was, the more they cherished their life. Yu Taitsong was a typical example. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would absolutely not take any risks. Chapter 5380. Of course, he could lie through his teeth, but how could it be easy to deceive an old fox like Yu Taitsong? If he was not careful, it would backfire on him. If Yu Taitsong saw him as an enemy with ulterior motives, then he would be screwed. The Lin you mentioned is from the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. I haven't heard of him before. Yu Taitsong frowned and asked. There was no need for Shui Jianfeng to continue to sow discord. From the moment he heard that Lin Yi had intervened in the Snow Sword sect, they were basically destined to be enemies. He was originally a primordial spirit left in the secular world. Because of this experience in the secular world, he had the opportunity to return to the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. In just a few months, he had already killed Qinjiu, the highest elder, and became the real new master of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. Now he wants to extend his hand into our Snow Sword sect. This guy's ambition is not ordinary. Shui Jianfeng explained while continuing to add oil to the fire. He knew from the beginning that Qinjiu was killed by Lin Yi. After all, Qinjiu was the source of his strength. But from what Qin Dongcheng and Lu Pinggan said, Qinjiu was killed by Lin Yi, so he did not take it to heart. Otherwise, he would not dare to show off in front of Lin Yi even if he was beaten to death. Unfortunately, it was too late to know now. His left arm was crippled. Preposterous. Yu Taitsong was provoked again, because he failed to break through to the late Yuanying stage. He was already full of anger. At this time, it was easier to be irritable, but it was limited to irritation, not to the extent of losing his mind. In fact, Shui Jianfeng's words were self-defeating. If Yu Taitsong still had doubts about Lin Yi's strength, then when he heard that Qinjiu was killed by Lin Yi, the last bit of doubt suddenly disappeared without a trace. It should be known that he had dealt with Qinjiu of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island many times, and was well aware of Qinjiu's strength. Although Yu Taitsong's current strength was far above Qinjiu's, in terms of Yuanying Old Monster's experience, Qinjiu was much deeper than him. Back when he was still at the peak of the Gold Core realm, Qinjiu was already a well-known nascent Soul Realm Old Monster. Now that he had surpassed Qinjiu, other than proving that Qinjiu's aptitude and opportunities were not as good as his, it also proved that Qinjiu's foundation was absolutely sufficient. In the entire primordial underworld, if Qinjiu claimed to be number 2 in the early nascent Soul Realm, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. The likes of Shui Jianfeng simply couldn't be compared to him. Since this Lin Yi, who he had never met before, was able to kill Qinjiu, then his strength was at least at the middle stage of Yuanying. There was no doubt about this point, and he might even be stronger than this. especially since this guy was an ambitious person. Then Yu Taitsong, could not rashly leave the mountain at this time. At the very least, he had to wait until his injuries were healed. After waiting for a long time, seeing that Yu Taitsong didn't continue after saying preposterous, Xue Jianfeng was instantly dumbfounded. Frowning, he glanced at this grand elder and said, "Elder Yu, you wouldn't be afraid, right?" "Nonsense." Yu Taitsong couldn't help blushing, glaring. This old man is a dignified middle-stage Yuanying expert. Looking at the entire primordial underworld, the number of people that can defeat this old man can be counted on one's fingers. Why would I be afraid of an insignificant nobody? Then you are. Although Xue Jianfeng didn't say anything unpleasant, his expression had already explained everything. But that expression had already explained everything. Within the suspicion, there was clear disdain. Being looked at with such a gaze, anyone would be enraged, let alone Yu Taitsong, who had always been high and mighty. However, Yu Taitsong ultimately still endured. Everything cannot be impulsive. One must think thrice before acting. This old man is currently injured. If I rashly go down, other than putting myself in a passive position, there is no benefit. As you said, this Lin Yi won't start a massacre at my Snow Sword sect for a while. Why don't we wait for a while and wait for this old man to recover before leaving the mountain? Then when do we have to wait? Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but frown. Things can be done slowly. In any case, you are now a peak early Yuanying expert. Why don't you even have this little bit of patience? Yu Taitsong looked at him with some dissatisfaction. He paused and said, "According to what you said just now, that Lin Yi wants to dip his fingers into Snow Sword sect. He won't leave for a while. What's the harm in waiting for a month or so?" This, Xue Jianfeng choked. He couldn't help but think that he had miscalculated. If he had known earlier, he would have changed to a more urgent way of speaking. He was very clear that Lin Yi definitely wouldn't have the leisure to dip his fingers into Snow Sword sect. If he waited for a month or so before leaving the mountain, he would have long disappeared. What? Don't tell me you have something to hide from this old man? Yu Taitsong said suspiciously. He was originally a fellow who had become shrewd with age. His vigilance was naturally unquestionable. Although Xue Jianfeng could be considered as someone on his side, suddenly becoming a peak early Yuanying was really full of strangeness. With Yu Taitsong's suspicious nature, it wouldn't be easy for Xue Jianfeng to completely gain his trust. No, absolutely not. Xue Jianfeng jumped in fright. If he were to fall out with Yu Taitsong, he wouldn't have a good ending. He quickly changed the topic and said, "Actually, I know of a good place. Not only can it let Elder Yu quickly recover from your injuries, it can also let you advance a level in a short period of time." "What place?" Yu Taitsong was startled, his expression showing some disbelief. "Speaking of this, in less than 2 years, I broke through from foundation perfection all the way to today's peak early Yuanying. Elder Yu, don't you think it's strange?" Xue Jianfeng said with a flash of inspiration. Of course it's strange. Yu Taitsong's interest was instantly aroused. His first question just now was about this matter. It was just that Xue Jianfeng had laughed it off temporarily, looking at his posture. Could it be that this brat was willing to say the real reason? The reason is very simple. It's because I joined an unfathomably powerful organization. It's precisely by relying on the organization's power that I completed my current world-shaking transformation. Xue Jianfeng's tone was filled with pride. Joining the center could be said to be a turning point in his fate. Although he couldn't avoid being controlled by the poisonous gas, compared to the supreme strength he could easily obtain, this little regret was nothing. Organization. Yu Taitsong's eyelids twitched when he heard this. His entire aura immediately became somewhat unfriendly, his tone unfathomable as he said, "You joined another organization? In other words, you've already betrayed the Snow Sword sect." As long as one joined another organization, regardless of whether it was a sect or a family, they would naturally be seen as betraying the sect. This was an undeniable point. Chapter 53:81. He had long been mentally prepared for this. Since he dared to say these words, he naturally had a certain degree of confidence in his heart. After all, through the conversation just now and his previous understanding of Yu Taitsong, this great elder was not an inflexible person who didn't know how to adapt. Oh, then this old man will listen respectfully. Yu Taitsong was indeed just putting on a show. Clearing the house was just a slogan to deceive people's hearts. When it was needed, he would use it to shout. As for now, it clearly hadn't reached that step. With the power of the organization, since it can make me a peak early Yuanying stage expert in less than 2 years, then naturally it can also easily make Elder Yu a level higher. At that time, let alone late Yuanying stage, even the unprecedented great perfection of Yuanying stage is not impossible. Elder Yu, don't you want to give it a try? Xue Jianfeng tempted. Although these words were a spur-of-the-moment idea, it wasn't entirely his own idea. Before this, the bespectacled doctor had mentioned the possibility of recruiting Yu Taitsong, but firstly, this person had always been in a state of closed-door training. Secondly, this person's strength was too high. Without a suitable opportunity, it would be difficult to recruit him. Therefore, he had never tried it. Now, because of Lin Yi's pressing, it could be considered a rare opportunity. It was just right to push the boat with the current great perfection of Yuanying stage. These words to any Yuanying stage old monster was a fatal temptation. Yu Taitsong was naturally no exception, especially at this juncture where he had just failed to break through to the late Yuanying stage. The impact of this temptation was almost invincible. Unsurprisingly, Yu Taitsong fell into silence. If it was anyone else who said this, he would definitely scoff at it. But Xue Jianfeng, a living example, was standing in front of him. He couldn't help but believe it. After a long while, Yu Taitsong's breathing was somewhat rough as he raised his head. You really have a way to let this old man touch the great perfection of Yuanying stage. Of course, I have never had the habit of wasting my saliva. Right now, I am formally extending an olive branch to you on behalf of the organization. Whether or not you want to become the #1 person in the entire immemorial small Jianghu will depend on Elder Yu's decision. Xue Jianfeng was all smiles as he continued to persuade Yu Taitsong, but he was secretly calculating in his heart. If he could convince Yu Taitsong to join them this time, it would definitely be a great merit. At that time, not only would the bespectacled doctor not punish him, he would even be heavily rewarded. As for the so-called #1 person of the immemorial small Jianghu, this was just a fool Yu Taitsong, who didn't know the inside story. When the center really grasped that technology, he, Xue Jianfeng, could become a nascent soul great perfection expert in minutes. Under focused nurturing, he might even be stronger than this. The so-called #1 person was nothing. Silence again. At this time, silence in itself was already a kind of attitude. Yu Taitsong was clearly moved. However, in the end, he was still an old monster with a suspicious nature. If he wanted to make Yu Taitsong take the bait with just a few words, he was still lacking by a bit. Elder Yu, there is one more thing that I have to remind you of. That Lin Yi's strength is not to be underestimated. Do you know how many moves he used to turn me into this state? Xue Jianfeng continued to strike while the iron was hot. How many moves? Yu Taitsong asked subconsciously. 1 move. I had no power to resist in front of him. My left arm was forced to be crippled. In order to lure the other party to take the bait, Xue Jianfeng spoke the rare truth this time. He smiled bitterly. Although your strength is much stronger than mine, to tell you the truth, even if you completely recover your strength at the peak of the middle, nascent soul stage, you still may not be that Lin Yi's opponent. At that time, no matter what you do, you will have to look at an outsider's face. Can you bear it or not? Is this true? Yu Taitsong immediately sucked in a breath of cold air, easily finishing off a peak early nascent soul stage expert in one move, and moreover making the other party unable to resist. Even if he recovered to his peak state, he still wouldn't be able to do it. Absolutely true. You will know once you ask. Xue Jianfeng spoke, with certainty. Although family scandals should not be spread, this matter had, after all, happened in public. There were too many people who knew, and Yu Taitsong was not one of them. In this way, the last line of defense in Yu Taitsong's heart finally loosened. On one hand, there was the temptation of a nascent soul stage expert, and on the other hand, there was the unfathomable threat of Lin Yi. There was no use for him to continue staying on the snowy peak. After all, what was the use of recuperating? All right, this old man agrees. Yu Taitsong quickly made a decision. Great, let's go down the mountain quietly now. I will bring you to my superior. Xue Jianfeng was instantly overjoyed. This time, he could finally atone for his mistake. Coming down from the snowy peak, the two concealed their auras and quietly left the territory of the Snow Sword faction, heading straight for Ke Luo Mountain. The entire Snow Sword faction was completely unaware of this. As for Lin Yi, he was personally treating Bing Wuqing's injuries. Previously, when she was in seclusion, she was ambushed by Xue Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing's injuries were too serious. This was no longer something that could be cured with a recover pill. If it was not treated carefully, it was very likely that there would be repercussions. Fortunately, Lin Yi was here. This little injury was nothing to him. After the treatment, Bing Wuqing went into seclusion again. With the effects of the supreme-grade condensing nascent pill, she quickly advanced to the next level and became a peak early nascent soul stage expert. In this way, he once again stepped on Xue Jianfeng. With the gap between their innate talents and foundations, it was impossible for Xue Jianfeng to be a match for him at the same level. There was no doubt about this. Bing Wuqing's successful advancement made Lin Yi feel slightly relieved. He had been accompanying Long all this while. Other than the first few days when the two of them had fun, it was Lin Yi who guided Long in her cultivation. It was not just about the realm level, but, more importantly, the development of the shattered ice physique. After all, the two trump cards, including the prison drawing and the shattered ice prison mirror, were developed by Lin Yi's help. Of course, with Long's level of comprehension, she could explore on her own. However, she did not have Lin Yi's experience and vision, so it was inevitable that she would take some detours. Moreover, it was difficult to see any immediate results in a short period of time. Therefore, even if there was some suspicion of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm, Lin Yi still took the job of guiding and coaching her step by step. The center was watching covetously, and it was impossible for him to stay by Lung's side all the time. Finding a way to improve Lung's strength as much as possible was the only way. However, even so, Lung's strength could not be improved to a level where she could truly protect herself in a short period of time, especially when facing an opponent like Xue Jianfeng, who was in the nascent soul stage. She really did not have many choices. It could only be said that she had Bing Wuqing by her side to take care of her. Unless the other party had some explosive improvement in strength, Bing Wuqing's current strength should be enough. Chapter 5382. It wasn't that Linny was in a hurry to leave, but as an outsider staying in Snow Sword Sect for such a long time, it was inevitable that people would criticize him. In particular, the way he appeared was too eye-catching. It was only natural that people would say that he had ulterior motives. Don't look at how Hong Qingyuan and the others were all respectful, like grandsons in front of him. In fact, they were all on guard in private, afraid that Lin Yi would have any ill intentions. With their strength, they wouldn't be able to withstand it. Looking at the way Tian Shui Jianfeng was dealt with, even Grand Elder Yu Taizong might not be able to handle it. They still didn't know that Yu Taizong had already followed Shui Jianfeng to Keiluo Mountain. At this time, if Lin Yi had any bad intentions, no one in Snow Sword Sect would stop him. Fortunately, Lin Yi didn't think about that at all. Apart from dealing with the expansion of the center, he basically came to the ancient small Jianghu as a tourist. If it weren't for Qinjiu and Qindongcheng, who were so stupid, he didn't even think about controlling the Green Cloud Sect in the North Island, let alone the Snow Sword Sect. After leaving Snow Sword Sect, Lin Yi didn't directly return to the Blue Cloud Sect in the north, with Xi and Yijia controlling the situation, plus Hong Zijuan's assistance. Especially since the biggest variable, Chunjiu, had been eliminated, the Chun family's high and mighty faction had now fallen apart. Even if the remaining people wanted to cause trouble, they didn't have the strength to do so. There was nothing to worry about the Blue Cloud Sect in the north. Since it was rare for him to come to Middle Island, apart from visiting cold, Lin Yi also planned to take a look around. He wanted to experience the customs of this Jianghu, as well as investigate the strength of the top figures, so that he could make corresponding countermeasures in the future. As for Lin Yi's next destination, it was Yiling Sect. He was going to Yiling Sect to see Duan Muyu. After the wonderful experience in the ancient trial, their relationship had far exceeded the scope of ordinary friends. Now that he had come to Middle Island, he should go. Keiluo Mountain was originally an ownerless land, but now it had been turned into a central base by Dr. Glasses and the others. Although it was still in its embryonic form, it was already beginning to take shape. It was just like a replica of the central headquarters in the secular world, but the overall structure was very secretive. If they didn't know about the Dark Clan's inner circle, even if there were disciples from the far ancient era who barged into the Dark Clan, they wouldn't be able to notice anything amiss. In a huge underground chamber, there were 5 ice coffins neatly arranged. Each ice coffin had a person lying in it. From left to right, they were Chunjiu, Qindongcheng, Lu Pingon, and Shui Jianfeng. The last one was Yu Taizong, Snow Sword Sect's Grand Elder. Yu Taizong was now like Shui Jianfeng, already a member of the Corps. Actually, when he had first followed Shui Jianfeng to Keiluo Mountain, Yu Taizong hadn't completely made up his mind to join the center. Although he was indeed a little moved after hearing Shui Jianfeng's words, his attitude at that time was still mainly half-believing and half-doubting. However, when he saw Chunjiu and the other 2 lying in the ice coffins, especially when he found out that Qindongcheng and Lu Pingon, the 2 high-level gold core cultivators of the Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island, who he had dealings with before, had now stepped into the peak of the early Yuanying stage, Yu Taizong was completely shocked. After the shock, the next thing was simple. Since the center had proved that they had the ability to produce Yuanying stage old monsters in batches, then it was naturally not difficult to imagine that they could promote people to the peak of Yuanying stage. Yu Taizong didn't hesitate for too long and quickly accepted the invitation of the Glasses doctor. On the surface, it was like this. In fact, if people like Yu Taizong said that they would completely submit to the center all at once, the probability of this happening was not to say that it was impossible, but it was absolutely negligible. This was a mutual use. When he reached the peak of Yuanying stage, there would be no one stronger than him in the world. At that time, no one could stop him from leaving this mysterious organization. This was Yu Taizong's real thoughts. After all, the center was too secretive. Even if they had agreed to join on the surface, it could not be said that there was any degree of recognition in private. At most, it was just an organization with great value. Someone like Yu Taizong, who was used to being aloof and powerful, would not easily surrender. Little did he know that from the moment he agreed, Yu Taizong was destined to be unable to get rid of the shadow of the center. How could the benefits of the center be so easy to take? Looking at the 5 ice coffins in front of him, the glasses doctor was in a good mood. The expansion plan to enter the small ancient underworld, although it was still in the early stage of preparation, was unexpectedly smooth. If this development continued, it would not take long to replicate the successful precedent of Heaven Stage Island, and it could be foreseen that this side would definitely be able to control the overall situation faster than Dr. Luan. After all, the strength level of the small ancient underworld was far worse than that of Heaven Stage Island. With a great contribution, from now on he would be able to truly rise to the top of the center. The glasses doctor thought, happily, Shuanya Lake. This was not the largest lake in the Middle Island, but it was definitely the most famous lake in the entire Middle Island and even in the small ancient underworld. At the same time, it was also recognized as one of the most unfathomable places. The reason was very simple, because this was the base of the Yiling sect. A large number of pavilions were all built in the middle of the lake. This was the most unique aspect of the Yiling sect. This alone was enough to show that its foundation was extraordinary. After all, this not only required a lot of manpower and financial resources, but also a series of special protective formations and other supporting facilities. This kind of extravagance was not something that an ordinary sect could afford. Although the Yiling sect had been passed down for thousands of years, it had always been lacking in disciples. Compared to the other large ancient sects, the number of disciples was at most 1/3 or even less. However, it had always firmly occupied the position of one of the 10 small sects, which was enough to show that its foundation was extraordinary. The scenery is really good. It's a good place to play. Lin Yi reclined in a small boat and slowly approached the pavilion in the middle of the lake. He could not help but feel relaxed and happy as he looked at the surrounding scenery of the water and sky. Duanmu Yu had not mentioned much about the Yiling sect before, but he had more or less mentioned it when they were chatting. Shuanya Lake was one of the famous places in the small ancient underworld, and this reputation was not given for nothing. The person driving the boat was a middle-aged man. When he saw Lin Yi's relaxed expression, he could not help but ask, "Sir, are you just a tourist?" "You can say that, but I'm mainly here to see a friend. Judging from your attire, you should be an outer disciple of the Yiling sect. You know Duanmu Yu, right?" Lin Yi asked casually. Chapter 53, 83. Now, he was only at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. His strength and aptitude were not good enough. He didn't even have the chance to go to the secular world and the primordial trial. According to the rules, he naturally had to call Duan Muyu eldest senior sister. Lin Yi nodded. The man's surprised reaction was not strange. Duan Muyu was a famous person in Yiling sect, and she was recognized as the person who would take over the sect in the future. Ordinary people probably couldn't get close to her even if they wanted to. "May I know your name?" the middle-aged man asked quickly after the surprise. Lin Yi said his name, and after thinking about it, he added his background, North Island Blue Cloud Sect. As one of the 10 small sects and families, North Island Blue Cloud Sect and Yiling Sect didn't have a good relationship, but they still had some connections. It should be more convenient to use this identity. You're Lin E. The middle-aged man's reaction was even more strange. Why? Have you heard of me? Lin E was stunned, but then he felt relieved. After experiencing those things in the secular world, his name had long been known to everyone. After these people came back, they inevitably talked about some interesting things with their fellow disciples. It was not strange that the man had heard of his name. Well, the middle-aged man nodded with a strange expression, and then didn't say anything more. When they reached the shore, he led Lin E to the door of the pavilion on water. After telling Lin E to wait at the door, he quickly went in to report. After a while, the middle-aged man came out, but Lin E didn't see Duan Muyu. Come with me. The middle-aged man glanced at Lin E and then led him into a small path next to the pavilion. Lin E looked around and couldn't help but be surprised. At the end of the path was a long staircase. It didn't lead up but down. The key was that it was extremely deep, dozens of meters deep. It should have reached the bottom of the lake. That was not all. After reaching the bottom, there was another long tunnel. After walking in the tunnel for 2 hours, the middle-aged man suddenly stopped. Eldest senior sister is in front. You can go in. She lives here. Lin E frowned a little. There was an iron gate in front of him. He didn't know what was behind the iron gate for the time being, but normal people wouldn't like to live in such a deep and secluded place. He didn't notice that Duan Muyu had such a hobby after getting along with her before. For now, the middle-aged man was non-committal. Thank you very much. Lin E nodded. Of course, he sensed that something was amiss, but he came here to see Duan Muyu. Since the other party said that Duan Muyu was inside, there was no reason for him to shrink back at this time. Without thinking too much, Lin E immediately pushed open the door and strode in. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, Lin E immediately understood what was going on. It was a formation. There was no doubt that this was a formation, and it should be a special formation for trapping people. After discovering this, Lin Yi's first reaction was not to frown. Instead, he couldn't help but want to laugh. As soon as he arrived at the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, he was tricked into entering the heaven-climbing formation. Now he came to Yi Ling's sect and entered another formation. It seemed that the level was also not low. What kind of fate was this? Lin E, why are you here? Soon, Duan Muyu's joyful voice came from the front. This was a medium-sized secret room, complete with tables and chairs. At this time, Duan Muyu was sitting on the bed in a daze. When he heard the door open, he thought it was another fellow disciple of the same sect. It wasn't until he saw Lin Yi's appearance that he realized it was him. He was overjoyed. It's rare for me to come to Middle Island. I came to see you. Lin Yi smiled casually. He looked at the iron gate that was closed again behind him, and then carefully looked at Duan Muyu. He sighed with emotion. I haven't seen you for a few months, and you've lost a lot of weight. Are you losing weight in seclusion? Uffed. Duan Muyu originally had a lot to say, but she burst out laughing when she heard this. Losing weight is losing weight. Why would I need to go into seclusion? Besides, how am I fat? No matter how much of a tomboy she was, she still couldn't escape the nature of a woman. Duan Muyu wouldn't tolerate herself becoming a fat girl. Moreover, she had nothing to do with the word fat. At most, her figure was more fit and beautiful. Moreover, it was the light and graceful kind of fit and beautiful. Then why did you find such a strange and weird place to go into seclusion? Or is this where you usually live, your boudoir? Lin Yi smiled. Their relationship had unknowingly become very close after going through the primeval trials. Although it wasn't quite the same as Cold and the others, They spoke as if they were old friends. There wasn't a need to be too particular. You think so? Duanmu, you rolled her eyes in amusement. Although this place had all kinds of furniture, there were no small decorations that a girl's boudoir should have. There wasn't even a decent mirror, no matter how much of a tomboy she was. Duanmu, you would not need a mirror. Which girl's boudoir didn't have a mirror? Not really, but with your style, it's not impossible. Linny grinned. I'm not that careless. Duanmu, you snorted and then explained. This is a detention room. It's specially used for disciples who have committed crimes. What crime did you commit? Linny asked. Divine knowledge grass. Duanmu, you spat out 3 words. What crime did you commit? He was even more puzzled. I don't know why, but the higher-ups of the sect found out that I obtained the divine knowledge grass. Moreover, someone asked me to hand over the divine knowledge grass in public, but I refused. Duanmu, you said calmly. Hand over the divine knowledge grass. Your Yiling sect has such a rule? Linny frowned. Usually, no matter what kind of treasure the disciple got during the test, it belonged to the disciple himself, and there was no such thing as handing it over to the sect. There was no such thing in the common world, and there was no such thing in the heavenly island, and it was the same in the ancient small world. Otherwise, it would be a huge blow to the disciples' enthusiasm. Who would be willing to risk their lives for treasures then? No, but the situation this time is special. After all, the divine knowledge grass is not an ordinary treasure. Duanmu shook her head. That was what she said, but it was impossible for her to hand over the divine knowledge grass just like that. It was one thing to be loyal to Yiling's sect, but it was another to hand over something that belonged to her, without any principles. Speaking of which, who did you hear about the divine knowledge grass from? Linny suddenly asked. Chapter 5384. There are not many people who know that the divine knowledge grass is produced in the primordial trial land, and there are even fewer people who know that you have obtained the divine knowledge grass. If there is really someone behind this, the only people who are really suspicious are these few people. Linny nodded. That's impossible. My master had been in retreat long before I participated in the secular world experience, and has not come out until now. He doesn't know that I have obtained the divine knowledge grass at all. What's more, he has always treated me like his own daughter. He would never target me in this kind of thing. Duanmu shook his head decisively. That's easy to say. If I remember correctly, there are only 3 people from your Yiling sect participating in the secular world experience this time, including you, right? Linny asked. And, apart from me, there are only 2 junior brothers, Chiomingchong and Su Fei. Duanmu nodded. Yiling's sect had a small population, and there were many thresholds for participating in the primordial trial. This time, they only sent 3 people, which was the least among all the 10 small sects and families participating. How strong are these 2 people? Linny continued to ask. Chiomingchong is at the peak of the foundation establishment late stage, and his strength is quite good. As for Su Fei, although his talent is good, he has only joined the sect for a short time, and is currently only at the foundation establishment early stage. At this point, Duanmu had somewhat understood what Linny meant, and his eyes suddenly lit up. You mean, when I gave you the half of the divine knowledge grass, although there were only a few of us present. After all, there were too many people. It is not surprising that some people inadvertently leaked the news. In your sect, the most likely people to know about this situation are your 2 junior brothers. Of course, we cannot rule out the possibility that they will leak it to others after they return, but the biggest suspects are definitely the 2 of them. Linny analyzed. So you think the biggest suspects are Chiomingchong and Su Fei? Duanmu pondered. Yes, there is no love without reason in this world. And naturally, there is no hatred without reason. If someone is really scheming against you behind your back, then they must be plotting something. Through this method, they shouldn't be able to obtain the spiritual knowledge grass for the time being, so it must involve other interests. Lin Yi didn't need to say anything else. Su Fei's strength is too low, and he has no enmity with me, nor does he have any conflict of interest with me. He can basically be ruled out as a suspect. As for Chiu Mingchong, Duan Muyu frowned and said slowly, he's actually much more experienced in Yiling's sect than I am. When I first joined the sect, he was already the second senior brother. It's just that he hasn't had a breakthrough all these years, so I've caught up to him. But in private, I'm afraid he still has some thoughts. In that case, this Chiu Mingchong is indeed suspicious. He instigated you to hand over the spiritual knowledge grass. If you compromised and handed it over, then even if there was no substantial benefit to him, at least you would suffer a big blow, lest the gap between you widen. If he refused to hand it over, as he was doing now, he would gain even more benefits. As long as the matter was blown up, he could plan well. It's not impossible to take over eldest senior brother's position. Lin Yi nodded. Just like now, Duan Muyu was put in confinement. For a leading figure in the sect, this was already a very serious punishment, especially since this might just be the beginning. Maybe Duan Muyu sighed. Although she sat in the position of Yi Ling sect's eldest senior sister, she always knew that sooner or later she would become a very important member of the sect's senior management. If everything went well, she might become the successor of the sect leader in the future. At least on the surface, this was how the senior management cultivated her. However, she did not have much desire for power. Even the masculinity she usually showed was inclined towards the chivalrous style of wielding a sword and singing. She never thought of becoming a scheming sect leader. Unfortunately, this kind of thing was not something that she could ignore. If she did not think about it, others would think about it. For example, if Chiu Mingchong, who was suppressed by her, was a guy who deliberately wanted to rise to the top, then he would definitely regard her as a thorn in his side. In this situation, it was almost natural for him to take advantage of this opportunity. There was nothing difficult to understand. Then what are you going to do now? Lin Yi sat down calmly and poured himself a cup of tea. Although this was a confinement place, except for the relatively claustrophobic environment, everything else was not bad. It could be considered a good room, in and outside. I don't know. Duan Muyu shook her head, based on her original character. Even if she couldn't be considered to be decisive in killing, she would definitely do things in a clean and efficient manner. She rarely hesitated, but the current situation really put her in a difficult position. Even if it could be confirmed that Chiu Mingchong was behind this, what could she do? Not to mention that she was now in confinement and could not get out at all. Even if she really had a chance to get out, it would be useless. Could she confront Chiu Mingchong face to face? The other party used an overt scheme. Now that the people who wanted the divine knowledge grass were the entire Yiling sect's senior management, what was the use of confronting them? To put it bluntly, at this moment, there were only two options left for Duan Muyu. Either hand over the divine knowledge grass, or keep the divine knowledge grass. That was all. There were pros and cons to handing it over, and there were pros and cons to keeping it. It all depended on how she weighed the pros and cons. Of course, Duan Muyu's personality tended to be straightforward. She might not have really weighed the pros and cons before making a decision. It might just be based on her personal preferences. After a moment of silence, Duan Muyu raised her head in a somewhat embarrassed and apologetic manner. You came to see me with good intentions, but I didn't expect you to be dragged into this. Or it was easy to guess what she was going to say next. If she was alone, she could continue to hold on and not give in. At worst, she could just treat it as a retreat, but now it involved Lin Yi. If Lin Yi was also locked up here because of her, it would not be right. Don't, if you change your original intention and hand over the divine knowledge grass for me, I won't agree. Linny interrupted. There was a large pile of divine knowledge grass roots in the space of the jade pendant. He did not care about Duan Muyu's half of the divine knowledge grass at all. According to their relationship, Duan Muyu handed over her half of the divine knowledge grass, and then Lin Yi would compensate her with a large piece of the divine knowledge grass root. After all, they had agreed to split it in half at the beginning, but Duan Muyu insisted. Chapter 5385. But you are also trapped here and can't get out. This is not a good idea, right? Duan Muyu frowned. She also thought that the sect's higher-ups might take the initiative to let Linny out, but this was unlikely. Perhaps in the eyes of those people, Lin Yi was a bargaining chip sent to their door. Exchanging the divine knowledge grass for Lin Yi's freedom, this kind of proposal might have already been put forward for discussion. Lin Yi glanced around with an indifferent expression. It's okay. You don't have to mind. This was the truth. He was now a genuine Yuanshen of the mysterious ascending stage. Even the one step to heaven array couldn't trap him. This unknown array naturally couldn't trap him either. After all, the one step to heaven array was personally set up by the legendary Great Emperor. No matter how great the background of this array was, it would be difficult to match it. How can I not mind? Duan Muyu smiled bitterly, but then she thought about it. In the river of spiritual knowledge, even a terrifying existence like Jiu Ying was subdued by Lin Yi. This might really be a small matter for him. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt a lot more at ease. Let's not talk about this. Anyway, we have nothing to do. Why don't we do something? Lin Yi suddenly suggested. While they were talking, he had carefully explored the array that trapped the two of them. It was not much different from the one step to heaven array. It was a relatively tricky array, but with his strength, it would not be a problem for him to get out. If he spent a little more effort, he could even uproot this array. However, that would be equivalent to completely falling out with Yiling's sect. Judging from Duan Muyu's attitude, she probably did not want to go to that step. Otherwise, she would not have stayed here and done nothing. She even deliberately left the divine knowledge grass untouched. Do something? Seeing Lin Yi's gaze falling on her, even Duan Muyu could not help but shiver. She was a man, but after all, she was still a girl. Especially in this situation, a man and a woman alone in a room, anyone would have a perverted thought. It's rare to see you. I want to take this opportunity to help you break through to the Jedon stage and also help you refine the spiritual awareness grass. It's a small gift. Why are you blushing? Lin Yi asked curiously. He had been with Duan Muyu for a while now, and this manly woman didn't blush often. Duan Muyu suddenly felt embarrassed. Just now, the scene in the mirror world where she was hugged by Lin Yi in a disheveled state unconsciously appeared in her mind. At that time, she acted extremely carefree, but now that she thought about it, she inevitably felt a little embarrassed, especially in this kind of situation. At this moment, the metal door suddenly opened, and a young man with a slightly tanned face stood outside. Without Duan Muyu's reminder, Lin Yi only needed a glance to recognize him. This person was Chiu Mingchong, the sect master, and the elders asked me to come over and ask, what is eldest senior sister's decision? Chiu Mingchong's eyes fell on Lin Yi. No. Duan Muyu's answer was simple and direct. Chiu Mingchong was not surprised by this. He had come over to ask the same question every few days, and now he was used to it, but this time he did not turn around and walk away. Instead, he continued, okay, but the higher-ups specifically told me another thing. Eldest senior sister, You said before that there was only half of the spiritual awareness grass in your hand, so the remaining half of the spiritual awareness grass is most likely with Lin Yi. Since he has come to our Yiling sect this time, I hope he can return it to its rightful owner. Return it to its rightful owner? Lin Yi was not surprised that the other party wanted him, but returning it to its rightful owner, what did this mean? Yes, the spiritual awareness grass has been a treasure of our Yiling sect since ancient times, and it is only clearly recorded in the ancient books of our Yiling sect. So is there anything wrong with saying that it should be returned to its rightful owner? Chiu Ming-chong said. Lin Yi was stunned for a long time when he heard this. Was it really appropriate to say such a shameless statement so openly? If there is information about the spiritual awareness grass in your family's ancient books, then all the spiritual awareness grass in the world can only belong to your family. What kind of weird logic was this? Duan Muyu, who was on the side, blushed a little and held his forehead. Even in his own family, these words were at most a joke, but now they were directly used to mock Lin Yi. Wasn't he ashamed? The sect master said that Yiling sect and the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island have always had a good relationship. He doesn't want to hurt the relationship between the two sects because of this matter. So, as long as you can hand over the spiritual awareness grass, then nothing will happen, and we will naturally treat you well and thank you. Chiu Ming-chong continued to add, That's... Lin Yi thought about it and concluded, the reason you gave me isn't very flattering, but I get the gist of it. I'm in a situation where I'm being held captive, and the only way to redeem myself is to hand over the spirit grass. Is that what you mean? Duan Muyu almost laughed out loud, and Chiu Ming-chong's face was a little ugly, but he still nodded and said, Your Excellency must be joking, but in general you are not wrong. I believe that Your Excellency should be a smart person who knows how to adapt to the situation, right? Of course I know how to adapt to the situation. Unfortunately, the half of the spiritual awareness grass that you want is not with me at all. I gave it to Bing Wuqing. If you want it, you might as well go directly to Snow Sword Sect to find him. Anyway, it's not far from here. Lin Yi said casually. What? Chiu Ming-chong was shocked when he heard this, and his face was obviously filled with disbelief. How can such an important thing as the spiritual awareness grass be given to an unrelated outsider? Your Excellency must be joking. He had only heard in private that Lin Yi had obtained the spiritual awareness grass, and Duan Muyu had gotten half. As for the specific situation, he was not clear about it. Naturally, he thought that Lin Yi had kept the other half for himself. The two of them had been together since the primordial trial, and they were a living pair. After obtaining the spiritual awareness grass by chance, they divided it in half. This kind of thing could be said to be logical. Unfortunately, Chiu Ming-chong did not know that the most important thing about the spiritual awareness grass was not the spiritual awareness grass, but the huge spiritual awareness grass root. Not only did he not know about this, but even the senior members of Yiling sect did not know about this. After all, there were no records of this in the ancient books. Otherwise, Chiu Ming-chong would have asked for the spiritual awareness grass root, and would not have stared at a mere half of the spiritual awareness grass. Am I familiar with you? Lin Yi asked. No, not familiar. Chiu Ming-chong was stunned, and his face was inexplicable. Chapter 53-86. Just you wait. Chiu Ming-chong left in a hurry after saying those 3 words. He was obviously going to ask the higher-ups of the sect for instructions. Not long after, he returned. The sect leader said that since you said that you gave the consciousness grass to Bing Wuqing, we can believe it. But to prove your sincerity, he hopes that you can write a letter and ask Bing Wuqing to come over. This shouldn't be a big problem, right? Okay, Lin Yi agreed, without hesitation. He took the pen and paper and wrote a letter on the table. There was nothing special, and he didn't mention the consciousness grass. He simply asked Bing Wuching to come to Yi Ling's sect. After he finished writing, he left the letter at the door for Chiu Mingchong to rush in and take it. When the iron door was closed again, Duan Muyu couldn't help but ask in confusion, "Why did you really write it?" "I'll write it if they want me to. It's not a big deal anyway." Lin Yi acted very indifferent. "But aren't you leading Bing Wuching into the fire pit for no reason?" Duan Muyu was a little worried. She already knew that there was some kind of tacit understanding between Bing Wuching and Lin Yi during the primeval trial. Although she didn't know why there was such a tacit understanding, she was basically sure that Bing Wuching should be on their side. Wasn't Lin Yi dragging his own people into this? "Since it's a fire pit, let's jump into it together. It'll be more lively this way." Lin Yi chuckled. Duan Muyu knew that he was joking, but she couldn't laugh at this time. After a moment of silence, she said, "I don't know what you're planning, but I don't want you to compromise with them because of me. You're the Grand Master of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, and the higher-ups of our Yi Ling sect aren't fools. As long as you insist on not agreeing, they won't do anything to you. They'll let you go sooner or later." "What about you?" Lin Yi asked. "Me? At most, I'll stay in confinement here. It'll be a good closed-door training." Duan Muyu didn't look like she was pretending to be relaxed. That was what she really thought. From her standpoint, she definitely didn't want to completely fall out with the sect, but with her personality, she wouldn't give in so easily. Then, she would just let the stalemate continue. It's really rare for a woman to have such a carefree temperament, Lin Yi casually praised, and then said, "Come, let's continue what we were doing just now." What is it?" Duan Muyu was confused. "Didn't I tell you? Since I have nothing to do, I can help you break through to the gold core stage. Don't you want to become a gold core stage expert and go out to scare them?" Lin Yi said in a natural tone. "Is that even possible?" Duan Muyu's eyes lit up. If she had the chance, she certainly wanted to break through to the gold core stage. In fact, if she was an expert of the gold core stage, this incident would not have happened. The divine knowledge grass could only be used by gold core stage experts. However, she was only at foundation establishment great perfection now. This was the most important reason why the higher-ups asked her to hand over the divine knowledge grass. If she became a gold core stage expert, then this argument would naturally be untenable. It was just that with her own ability, she could only fantasize about this kind of thing. If she really wanted to break through to the gold core stage, she was actually not there yet. After all, strictly speaking, she had not advanced to foundation establishment great perfection for a long time. It had only been less than 2 years, and the key was that she didn't have the conditions. Without a gold core stage in hand, how could it be easy to break through to the gold core stage? What's impossible about it? Lin Yi said as he took out a handful of medicinal pills. Duan Muyu was dumbfounded at a glance. They were all gold cores, golden pills, and each one had a halo on it. They were all F** King top grade. This time, Lin Yi's main purpose for coming to Yiling's sect was to give her some gold cores golden pills. After all, they were friends who had gone through life and death together. With Lin Yi's character, he would not mistreat such a reliable true friend. All for me. Duan Muyu looked at the handful of gold cores golden pills that the other party stuffed into her hand and was dumbfounded. She knew that Lin Yi was a generous person, but it was a little shocking for him to be this generous. These were top-grade gold cores golden pills. Yes, you don't have to eat them all at once. For now, eating 2 should be enough, Lin Yi said. 2. Duan Muyu was shocked when she heard this. She knew that the higher the grade of the medicinal pill, the more it should not be eaten, especially top-grade Goldcore's golden pills. With her current realm, eating one would take all her energy to digest the incomparably huge medicinal power in it. Eating two at once would really kill her. Don't worry, of course you can't eat two when you're alone. But with me here, it'll be fine. I can help you guide the medicinal power. Linny explained. He knew that Duan Muyu hadn't completely touched the barrier between foundation building and golden core. He hadn't reached the point where he could really break through to the golden core stage yet. It might not be safe if he only ate one supreme grade golden core, but if he ate two, then it wouldn't be a problem. Is it really possible? Duan Muyu was still a little incredulous. She had never heard of eating two top-grade Goldcore's golden pills in a row. As for letting someone guide the medicinal power during the breakthrough process, it was even more unheard of. This kind of thing was completely contrary to her common sense. Yes, Linny nodded and did not explain much. Okay, then let's begin. Duan Muyu agreed very quickly. After the magical experience in the Archean trial, even if her trust in Lin Yi was not as blind as Song Lingshan and the others, it was not much different. After all, this was a mystic ascension stage existence that Jiao Ying personally admitted. Compared to this, what really made her hesitate was actually the top-grade golden pills themselves. The value of so many top-grade golden pills did not need to be mentioned at all. It was much more valuable than the consciousness grass. A person like her, who clearly distinguished between kindness and hatred, would generally never accept favors from others, especially such an exaggerated favor. Just like how she did not want a big pile of consciousness grass before, and in the end, she only wanted half a piece of consciousness grass, because this was the only thing she had agreed with Lin Yi in advance. But unexpectedly, she did not hesitate for too long on this, and did not even symbolically reject it, and directly accepted Lin Yi's gift. Lin Yi did not know what she had thought through, but he did not find it strange, because Duan Muyu was originally a very free and easy woman. Duan Muyu slightly adjusted her breath, trying to adjust her state to the best. This process did not take much time, because she had been doing this all this time. Then she stuffed the two top-grade golden pills into her mouth without hesitation. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.